to finish. So I'm really excited because this is what I've been wanting to get the download on, and they have a lot of tech, because I think that's what it is. It's like when you're trying to learn this, a lot of times it's from books unless you have someone there with you. But this is what's really nice is when you have people that have been doing this for 20 plus years, they have that tech, the stuff that you wouldn't even think about until you've done it for so long and made so many mistakes that finally you figure out a different way. So, all right, let's welcome Patty and Ray, and let's see their wisdom. So grateful for y'all. Welcome y'all.
Hi. Oh, thanks for hanging out, you guys. Thanks for everybody for turning out. This is like a really amazing group and an amazing event. Tamara and Joey and Miss Beautiful Sierra and Noble, you guys are out there like making this an amazing thing. So thank you so much. This is Ray. I don't even have to like worry if he's standing behind me because I'm not tall enough to block his face. So anyway, I'm Patty. This is Ray.
I'm Ray. That's Patty.
Yeah. And together we are Noble Gardens. We got our start, a long time ago. We met in 2009. Ray has been growing mushrooms for a long time since then. I wasn't even like thinking about any of this kind of stuff when Ray started growing mushrooms. What year did you start growing mushrooms? Do you remember?
Oh, I have no idea.
How old were you?
I don't know. I was 16, 17 years old.
16 or 17 years old.
I was too high to tell. I don't know.
Yeah, yep. So it's been a long time.
Can I sit down? Does anybody mind if I sit down? Nobody
Yeah.
minds. All right, there we go.
I'm okay. I think because
Do you want? I can
I'm
get you
warmer.
a seat. Don't
I'm
let.
all right.
That's so rude of me.
I'm
to,
totally
sit
good.
Down, like,
No. I'm totally good.
all right, go ahead.
I'm good.
After you.
So in any event, everything I've learned from Ray, and that's pretty incredible because he's
She means
pretty
about
patient.
everything, not
Everything.
just mushroom.
All the world.
Anyways.
No. And likewise, and vice versa. He's learned about the universe through me too. But that not being said, we've got a really cool thing that we're going to do here for you, and I've got some notes to kind of help guide me.
Yeah, tell them
I
what we're
haven't
going to tell
smoked
them.
up some weed.
Tell them what we're going to tell them. Right now, we're going to do this thing. I think we saw a video one time when we were starting to teach, and it said, first you tell them what you're going to tell them.
And
then you tell them.
You tell them.
And then you tell them what you told them. Okay? So that's what you're about to experience
That's
right
what
now.
you're about
To the
to
best of our ability. We haven't actually done this. I don't think we've performed
It's been
in
a long time.
It's been a long time.
It's been a long while.
We shouldn't have left you
Yeah, that's right.
without some dope spores. Step two. Anyway, sorry.
Okay.
So
all right.
sorry.
Ray has also smoked weed.
I have indeed partaken of the weed.
That is right.
Here we go.
So, what we're going to cover today is pretty much the entire cultivation process, which sounds potentially overwhelming.
Journey of the spore.
The journey of the spore, but it is not overwhelming.
We're going to go from
So-
spore to a lot more.
That is right. We are going to turn straw into gold. So, we have here for you today, we've got agar preparation, sterilization process, and we also have spawn production. How to prepare your grain, what that process looks like, what to avoid, what to try to do. And that's our process. There's tons of different ways to do all this stuff. This is like, you can do this 100
You want
different
to
ways.
sit down?
Heck yeah, come sit down, buddy. This is our little boy Chance.
Should we do it like this? I don't know.
That's fine. It's fine. And then we've got the sterilization of that process, which we're going to kind of fast forward through some of this, like we've got like a cooking show kind of thing. It's going to be like cooking magic. All of a sudden it's done. So then we're going to cover bulk substrate, and we're going to talk about transferring that grain, that spawn, that's the technical word for it. We're going to transfer that spawn over to a bulk substrate for the purpose of fruiting. Okay, so we're going to talk about all of those things, and somewhere along the line somebody might have a question or something like that. You can probably pop in, but if everybody does that, we're going to be here a long time. This will be real cold. So moving right along, we have here over on that table some agar, but here's what's happening outside. We're going to start backwards to forwards. Okay, because that's the process of the journey of the spore. You start at spore germination, and then you come down around the backside to the actual process of inoculating your bulk substrate. But all of these processes take time. And so in order for us to be able to orchestrate this for you tonight, we have to kind of pull things out of order. Okay, so it's going to be a little bit, go ahead.
we're gonna pull things out of order.
We're gonna pull some things out of order. So we're gonna start by inoculating some wheat straw, which has been cooking outside. Ooh. Yeah, how did that happen? Is that hurting?
That hurts.
There's pain? I bet. Take the glove off. Yeah, let's look at the fingertips. Is there
alright?
a blister? Let's see. Put
How
that
bad?
finger straight out. Sorry guys, here, Ray, take this. Yeah. Okay.
Anyway, you want me to continue?
Yeah, I do. I want to examine the boy's fingers.
All right,
Lovely
go ahead.
Smoking. You move forward. I'm going to bring in the bulk substrate on my way back. You
Awesome.
take those things off the table. And if anybody wants to see a little bit closer, we're going to open up some grain spawn, and we're going to hit some grain spawn with some pasteurized wheat straw. So Ray, do you want to talk
How about I'll answer some questions? I'm sure some people have some
actually,
questions.
One thing you could do is talk about the temperature parameters for your spawn, for your wheat straw. Sorry.
Oh, well, we're just going to pasteurize the wheat straw. I think pasteurization temperatures are like 135 to 175, 180 or something like that. But I'm pasteurizing in this way. Sometimes I pasteurize in a barrel and I will not go all the way up to boiling. But here I'm kind of taking hot water, so I get it as hot as I can, and I'm doing a insulated cooler technique where I put 5-gallon buckets into a cooler and then transfer boiling water into that cooler in some 5-gallon buckets, because this is where you learn by failure. I've melted a few coolers by trying to pasteurize without putting 5-gallon buckets to absorb all the hot water and kind of buffer that heat in a cool, because I've melted them. They just like warped right in front of me, and you lose $90 in that nice cooler you thought was going to work so well. But yeah, so pasteurization temperatures. We're gonna hit it for an hour, some bulk substrate, which I got some manure and some straw. There's all kinds of cool reasons why I like mixing the straw and the manure for oysters. Actually, people typically don't think of the oyster mushroom as a manure-loving mushroom, but I mean, what is horse manure and most cow manure is pretty much just chewed up straw. Anyway, it's just straw, and everyone knows that the oyster, not everyone, I guess, knows. I'm sure everybody's got to be familiar with oyster mushrooms by now, right? Everybody sitting in here has.
Yes.
That's right.
We have like a small, sad little fruit because it's cold. But this ran through in our yard. We fucked around and found out.
Well, we were just like, let's show. See, I already knew, but I was like, let's show how oyster mushrooms that are not typically known for digesting pine straw and conifer wood, unless you're using a specific oyster mushroom. The pulmonarius is made for, it's inclined to eat some conifers. But we that is mostly pine straw that oyster is grown through, is starting to cycle the nutrients that are held in that material, in that mulch, into stuff that plants can use. So even if the fruits are not so beautiful, they're there. It's really amazing to me in this very cold weather. It is a cold loving strain.
And what makes that super interesting is not really so much that you can grow food on something that's incredibly ineffective, right? Like, you're not going to get amazing fruits off of that you're like, yum, yum, dinner.
Well, I bet if the temp was right, yes, you would.
Yeah, you
I bet
would.
You'd
You
get
would.
a yum, yum dinner mushroom out of that thing.
But from a perspective of being a farmer, from the perspective of being in a situation where you're trying to close up your loops, you're trying to make soil, you're trying to break down all of the stuff that's coming off of your land, this is an incredibly effective way to make soil, because that is breaking down those hydrocarbons, and it is opening up for a whole new set of biology to come in after that mushroom has colonized and eaten down and broken stuff down. So your microbiome system that's part of the loop. That's part of what mushrooms do.
It's a big deal.
It's a big deal. It's a really big deal. It's a
really
big
important.
deal to the Dem Pure people. It's a big deal to all of us. It's a big deal to the forest. It's important that there are mushrooms like the oyster that are so good at breaking down those hydrocarbons that we introduce those into environments that are incredibly threatened by tree die-off like ours, because that helps hydrate that wood and it prevents forest fires in the long run. So you guys walk around with pocketfuls of oyster spawn. I'm not even kidding. When you go on your hikes, inoculate that forest, man. Hit it. Do it. You know, people can plant.
What's
1,000 trees. Anyway.
what should we talk about?
So
I'm
now-
not sure how the
Now what we have
breakdown is what we're going through.
you want to bust open that bag. You want to spray it with
Well,
some-
just let me. I hope everybody doesn't mind that we have not we've not done this in so long. So I'm going to ask her questions as we're going through and how we want to. Do we? How are we going to deal? When are we going to deal with doing the auger and the?
So one thing you should do right now, while I handle this,
Yeah.
is to actually go ahead and you see how this is steaming. This is because this sat in pasteurized temperatures
Yeah,
for
this
about
has been
an
pasteurized.
hour.
We got straw that's pasteurized.
hour and a half.
Yeah.
Right? This is your best food production bulk substrate. Okay, if you're, go ahead.
That was water, right?
And that was just pasteurized in
Yeah,
water.
it's hot water.
Hot water.
You're saying the hot
Correct.
water and just sat there for an hour and a half.
Yep, and that sat there for that hour and a half for about at about temperatures that are pasteurization. So you don't want boiling water.
Yeah, especially for the straw, man. If you boil the straw, this is where you do it and you find out that it's really like it will contaminate like crazy for some reason if you boil the straw. I don't know. It's killing off.
What happens is you thermogenically hatch bacteria that otherwise wouldn't be given.
That's why I hang out with her.
So you end up hatching stuff that you don't want to hatch. So you really want to stay within pasteurization temperatures, and that range is what, Ray? 140 to
It's like 135 to 180-ish. Yeah.
180.
I like to.
Yep.
I like to
we like
peg it at
use-
170, in the 170.
Right, so I'm going to put the oxygen seals facing up on this. Do you guys want to look at this? This is millet grain.
And I'm going to show you
around.
something like what. Yeah, while you're looking at that, I want to tell you like when you're deciding like has the straw reached a temperature that I should inoculate? It's really up to your hand, and this is what I love about mushrooms. They're very similar to us. If your hand says "ouch," then it's not time to inoculate it. When you're comfortable in there, that mycelium is going to be really comfortable in there. It's so similar to our own biology, right? You know, and so you're just going. That's my temperature gauge, and I'm probably the least sterile. Like I do not, in a way, I'm going to teach you, and I'm going to do stuff that don't necessarily do. I'm about to stick my hand in here without doing an alcohol bath, but I have just faith in like the inoculation rate that I'm going to use and the vigor of the conditions that it'll be in. I'm not too worried about it. So but
Best practices.
best practices.
That's where I come back in.
Sorry, this is not best practices.
This is not the
I'm
best
doing it, though.
practices, but oysters are so forgiving. They really, truly are.
Does anybody
If you
remember
were
the
trying
Life
to work
cereal
with-
commercial?
They're
Life
like
cereal,
Mikey.
Mikey eats anything, man.
He'll eat anything. Yeah, oysters are like that.
Sorry to interrupt.
If you were dealing with something that took a longer time to fruit, like shiitake or maitake, which you can also cultivate, if you're looking at something that's going to take 3 months to possibly fruit, you better watch your contamination. You better all clean, nice, good, healthy practices. And then even still, if you're expanding spawn and you're running from agar, just run it. Don't keep pulling away from your spawn.
Can I interrupt you for a second?
Yeah, do it.
I just wanted to say that one of the way you can stick your hand in there and it'll be very, very hot, and you'll say, "Oh, I should come back and wait 20 minutes." You don't have to do that. Like you just lift this
You
stuff
just
up
stir it.
and you let it drop through the air, and it'll be cool in seconds. It just doesn't take long, and so you can kind of do it without a lot of time in between the steps.
That's right.
Especially with straw, it's harder to do it with other substrates like sawdust. You wouldn't be, but
You develop that hand though too, where it's like you can handle something hot. Yeah.
Are you pulling that sack straight out the water, or
No, so we've had this draining.
We
outside.
drained it for a
We
while.
drained it for a little while.
that was one of my questions? How much water?
so
Field capacity
Was
is
that?
field capacity is the term, and Ray's going to describe it. For
well,
you.
it's really hard to see field capacity in straw, like because it's just hard to see. So field capacity actually is what we would utilize, like if we were doing a composted substrate or a sawdust substrate where you could squeeze it. Field capacity would be like it feels dry, like if you put it in your hands, you're not going to leave puddles of water in your hand. But if you give it a good tight squeeze, you'll get a rivulet of water running, and that's field capacity. For some reason, I think it's like that's the manure's acceptance of water after a rain, and in the field after it's drained into the ground. Like that's probably what they were talking about. But it's going to be hard to call field capacity. But after a soak on straw, it's just hard. But after it's soaked, if you just let it drain for a few minutes until it stops dripping, it's ready to roll. That could take 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Sometimes I'll just kind of let it sit there for half an hour and I come back. That's typically how I'll do it.
Yeah. The other thing too that you can use as a guide is when you're working with a tub like this, you can kind of look down at the bottom, and if you see water standing, that's going to be too much water.
Standing water is kind of your enemy in general when growing mushrooms. You see standing water, you're going to have bacterial issues pretty much like you. Yeah. If I see photos in the groups, one of the things we do is we started the mushroom growing group on Facebook. I don't know if that was stated. I'm really proud of it. I don't know why. I just started the thing and but it is the largest mushroom growing group on Facebook at this point, like 265,000 people or something like that. Like I'm talking to a small city. I know it's Zuckerberg's, but I feel it's our baby.
Gourmets. So no.
Yeah, we don't talk about psilocybin on that group at all. But if you grow one, you can grow another one. You get to know your own mushroom. All the techniques are the same, so you can use that information to do whatever you want with. I don't tell anybody what to do.
Yeah.
You do what you want to do.
Yeah, but the reason that we do that is because we want people of all walks of life, regardless of whether or not they're tapped into the magic or not, to embark on mushroom growing, because that in and of itself is the magic of mushrooms, right? 1. 2, we don't want to lose our group on Facebook.
Yeah, they will shut you down.
They will shut
They will shut you down.
You will get Fuckerberged. Okay? So,
Don't say that on a broadcast. They'll it's going to be in the algorithm is hunting us now. They're like,
they've been on the hunt
Fuckerberg.
for me, trust me. I'm on the list. Anyway, so now I have our straw substrate at an appropriate temperature because I can stick my hand in there and I feel no pain, but it feels comfortable. Okay? This feels not too wet. My hand's not coming out of here dripping. So now I'm going to take, and I did best practices. We put this into a tub that wasn't like super clean, okay? Ray ran his hand through it. It's not like, but it's a good idea to try to give your mushrooms a head start. So now I'm going to reach in here. I'm going to grab this grain spawn.
So ordinarily, best practices too. You would know especially if you're doing this on a production level.
Yeah,
we do
reach
not
your
grow
hand
like
in there.
that very often, but you would do probably a 5 to 10% inoculation rate with spawn to straw.
And you would also not reach your hand right into your big giant spawn bag that you're hoping to pull from for weeks and weeks, right? You would cut that with a clean knife. You would take your portion off using a tool or gloved hands. I did alcohol in my hands, but then I touched a bunch of stuff and I reached back over. That's not best practices. So now I'm going to take this because it's millet.
If anybody actually wanted to come up and get your hands in and
Yeah,
throw it
you
in
can-
here,
you
we
guys
could
can-
do this
you can
together.
totally
If
come
anybody
up
wants
and
to,
handle some.
if anybody would like to
And-
feel the mycelium. And,
Okay, awesome. So what we're going to do, because you guys are going to come up, what you can do is you can stuff yourself
Hands on.
a bread bag. Hold on. You can spray them with alcohol if you're comfortable with that. That would be awesome. I'm going to get you guys some bread bags that I've been saving from home.
You got what on your hands? What kind of paint? Some oil-based.
All right, does anybody need a gluten-free bread bag? Because I got those too.
This is high-tech stuff. We're like,
Anybody?
yeah, you're doing it right.
I got
Just break it up
gluten-free,
into
or I've got
see
just
the
anybody
little
can have.
pieces right
You're
there.
going to stuff your own kit.
Oh,
You
they're
get to
too
take this home.
No, not necessarily.
becomes
but
your new
I'll
baby.
talk about that.
Okay, good.
All right, y'all are getting a mushroom kit right now to take home and nurture. And I have a QR code on my phone that gives you a care instruction sheet that I so lovingly put together all the way front to end, has our email address, has our phone number. Keep in touch, post on Instagram, post on Facebook, tag us, ask questions. Let's go through this process, all of us together. It's going to be super fun. So take this now and go ahead and stir it around. How much did y'all put in here? Oh, quite a bit. Do we have another bag of this, Soka?
Oh yeah.
Okay, cool.
But
Should
I
we
would
go
throw
drain
more
it?
spawn in there.
More spawn?
Yeah.
Okay.
Here, do this for me.
Yeah.
I know we haven't.
I'll
done
hold
this
the
in a
mic, you do it.
while. Okay. Great.
All right. Here. All right. I'll go around. You just let it drop.
Where's the alcohol? I'll do this one. I'm gonna
Okay.
do some best practice. Okay.
So Ray's
Let me
gonna
go through you.
show us his specialized
This is my thing. Let me do
straw tossing skill. He tosses straw like nobody's
my- Oh, come on. Mess.
I am messing with you.
All right. So I had
So,
one
here you go.
question. You asked like, is it too big? Like, so when you're breaking this up, you're gonna see like those little grains. This is millet grain, by the way. And we're gonna talk about that. It might be hard to even understand what we're playing around here. You asked, was it too big? So each one, it's not that it's too big, but we have the potential to create little points of inoculation, and that's what they'll call these little pieces. Any little piece of separate mycelium is what we call a point of inoculation. If you break up those clumps, you get one clump could be like 20 points of inoculation that you missed out on. So even though you really don't have to, if we mix it up and it's one chunk, it's going to have some surface area that's bigger and it'll spread out and radiate from that. But really, I like to break it up as much as you can into the individual grains. And then I will do like,
Can I add something to that?
you can add it.
Okay, so the part of the reason that that's important, okay, is because what you're trying to do is you've got to race against time. Okay, you've got a product, you've got a substrate, a bulk substrate that's very inclined to
It's all a race.
trichoderma.
It is a race.
Okay, trichoderma isn't really your enemy. You just throw that out in the garden. It's actually one of the best things you can do for your soils. Throw some trichoderma in there. They're selling it for
the main
hundreds of
contaminant
dollars.
for mushroom growing, the mean green, the
Mean
trichoderma,
green.
is a product that they will sell you in the grow stores for your garden. Like they will sell you trichoderma spore. So I never like all the I like to set up. Noble Gardens is trying to set up a system where every failure is just the feeding of another function. There is no failure. Copying the universe. You know, well, a screw up is glorified because it's only screw up in that cycle of the operation. You move the screw up into another thing, and it's the food for that. So it's a beautiful thing when you fail. It's great, but so we're getting ahead of ourselves. I've not gotten enough spawn in here that
That's enough spawn? I can see it in a while. You don't have your glasses on.
Okay, well there you go. You're right.
Yeah, I know what I mean.
She's right, everyone. This is probably not the first time today. All right, I need to put this thing down.
So I'm gonna stuff it in here.
I do want to mix it up.
You mix
How
it
do
up.
we show the camera too?
Yeah.
This one right there.
This
kind
one
of
here?
like just
So-
kind of doing how you're doing the tech over there. and-
All right.
Yeah,
Here, let me
good.
have somebody. You guys take one and pass one down. There you go. That's like a teacher trick, isn't it? Take one and pass it down. All right. So I'm shoving this in here pretty tight, and the reason I'm doing this is because it's a race against time. This is a race against time. I want to give my mushrooms the leg up. That's why we have best practices. That's why we go ahead and bother wasting the energy to go ahead and cook the straw instead of just throwing it on the straw, because it'll eat it. You'll see tomorrow. We're not going to pasteurize all that rice straw that we put on that hugel out there. We'll throw this in there and it's going to eat. Okay, but this I might want to eat from, like, and have real food production, right? In that instance, I want to maximize my yields. We're a bunch of farmers. We all know about maximizing our yields, right? That's the whole purpose. So to maximize my yield, I want to compress this down, get that air out of there, and I want to make all of my substrate touch. I want it to be nice and tight. And the reason is leap off is the key term here that you're thinking about. Leap off. How far does my mycelium have to reach to get to the food,
To the next piece of food.
to the next piece of food?
And it can do a heavy duty leap. My mycelium is
do a
crazy. You'll
heavy-duty
see
leap.
it just send out a hypo thread like Spider-Man.
But there's other stuff in here trying to also do that. Right? So I'm going to get it as tightly compressed as I can. Okay? And then I'm going to take it and I'm going to tie it off. And then I'm going to do something that seems like it's not going to make a whole lot of sense because I just tried to push the air out of here. I'm going to poke some holes in the bag.
Yeah.
So-
Does anybody have any?
Move this pile of rocks. Now move this pile of rocks back. Now, the reason I'm going to poke holes in this bag is because oxygen, mushrooms breathe in oxygen and off gas carbon dioxide. They have a beautiful symbiotic relationship in the garden. So when you plant vegetables and cannabis and other things on a bed of mycelium, you're pushing carbon dioxide up through those mushrooms, and the plants are going, right? And they're pushing out oxygen, and the mushrooms are like, oh, thank you.
Did you?
I didn't poke any holes in it. There you go. So you have to oxygenate your bag, otherwise it's going to
Like
suffocate
this, you know,
and die.
you can use a nail, you can use whatever.
Yeah.
Just give it some aeration.
Just give it
Boom,
some
that's good
aeration.
enough.
Boom, done. Now you
So
let it
easy.
sit.
Reuse things too.
Yeah.
I mean, we're using the grocery store
We use
bags.
The grocery store bags, you know.
We use old tubs.
Now, do you like best management practice, like this kind of practice, is probably alcohol inside the bag or like some kind of cleanse it?
I didn't bother with any of that for this.
This was all done without any regard to any sterilization. Even I tell you the truth, most of my mushroom growing now, I'm going away from doing any heat treatments. All I do is soak in water, and I get it into the right spot.
Yeah.
I do not do
Yeah.
most of this because I grow pretty much exclusively in outdoor and shaded environments, and I don't grow indoors. If I move myself back indoors, which I'm contemplating doing, I will start more pasteurization process, because once you go inside, you're dealing with so many other weird competitors, and you're not getting the benefit of the sterilizing aspect of fresh air. The fresh air will come in and keep everything, you know, as soon as that CO2 concentration gets high enough, all sorts of bad stuff happens. And I'm no scientist. I don't know why that happens. I mean, I kind of know, like, I'm kind of uncomfortable in this room. That's how I judge everything. The only thing I can most of the time afford is my own body and my own nose and my own lungs. And if I walk into a room and I'm like, oh man, it's just like, I can feel it's stuffy in here, and it's the humidity, I can smell something wrong. And you really can key in, especially bacteria. Like, I can walk into any mushroom growing place, and I've been over to many where the grow room is kind of not in sight, in a house, and I'll be like, oh man, your grow room is nasty. I mean, I just walk in the door, like, dude, you need to clean that up. Like, let's go and see how much contamination you got lurking in that room, because, but bacteria is really, I think. So
I brought this.
But to the point, I would like to encourage people to grow outdoors, grow in open air, shaded and misted environments, but not humidified, and get away from any kind of pasteurization.
Yeah, especially heat pasteurization. Now, one thing we could demonstrate for you guys in the summer is that you could do a cold pasteurization, cold in the summer, because you're actually doing an anaerobic pasteurization. So you can submerge your substrate underwater, let it hold at a temperature anywhere between 68 and up degrees, and when it smells nice and disgusting, you drain the water off, and it's pasteurized, right? And you don't have to use any.
Well, it's not pasteurized, but it is fermented.
It's fermented.
It's
Yeah.
treated.
It's treated.
So what happens is, in the submerged water, all of the oxygen is starved. So things that, like not having oxygen, anaerobic bacteria and such, will be breeding in there, and then they dominate the whole substrate. They dominate the whole straw of the thing. And then when you pull it out of that, all of that, and then all the things that require fresh air have died in the water, just submerged.
So
and
you
then
killed off your competitors.
when you pull it out,
Yeah.
the things that are only in there at that point are things that can survive without oxygen, but now they're in full oxygen, and then they get killed off. So you're using.
So you gain the same effect. Yeah.
I mean,
So you gain the same effect.
the hotter it is, the quicker it is. Like
Yeah.
right now, I don't even know if it would work.
Yeah.
But even that, like, I don't, honestly, I don't even care about that anymore. Like, I don't even need to treat.
Minutes, hours, days.
Oh, it'd be days.
Days.
So yeah.
Okay, yeah,
typically,
In the summer,
typically if it was
it's
90,
days.
I would say 3 days.
Okay.
If it was like closer to 70, I would say probably 10 days.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And you'll know when it smells bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, it kind of
Ish.
gets funky.
It gets funky. It gets, it gets smelly, and you can oftentimes you'll see like a little bit of a foam layer on top. It kind of looks like what you get when you're working with doing kimchi, or you're doing
Yeah.
other kinds of fermentation, right? You're working with kombucha,
Yeah.
right? So this is horse manure which also the mushroom loves to eat. Why? Because horses actually don't break down most of the food they eat. So there's tons of food left in there. And so we will gather horse manure from our neighbors. And the reason we like horse manure is a couple of reasons. First off, they don't really digest all of their food. Second off, it doesn't transmit E. coli or any other bacteria or illness it would be contagious to humans, unlike bovine, right? The other reason is because it's pretty readily available, and oftentimes
It's all over Lake County.
It's all over Lake County, and oftentimes people don't give their horses antibiotics like they do their cows, right? And they oftentimes are not really vaccinated for much either, right? So they just generally are not as treated agriculturally. So as a byproduct, it's cleaner. And it also just makes a really beautiful tea when you soak it. You can take that and apply that directly to your soil and to your garden. It's a really beautiful byproduct from within the area, from any area like this that's rural. And we even found it down in the city. We would go to the racetracks and get the stuff from them.
Yep.
You know, I mean, it's pretty cool. And there are a lot of stables and stuff down in the Bay Area and Oakland. So anyway, this is another substrate. We could go ahead and inoculate it, or we can move on and talk a little bit about agar.
Oh, let's move on. If everybody wants to
okay?
come
Does
and
anybody
look at
wanna
this
come
big
and
pile
look
of
at the big
Now, do you put that manure with the straw? or
We
just
would. We could do
manure?
it either way.
Yeah.
You could. Yeah. Usually with manure, we will mix it with something
I
else.
like growing oysters
But you
with
can't just do
manure.
it plain by
Actually,
itself?
this is a great substrate for growing Psilocybe cubensis for one. Like that, you can use straight horse manure. Is kind of it's
That's cool.
it's nothing short of kind of amazing. I mean it's awesome.
That's what it likes.
It does like that, but
like
it
it.
really is great for the oysters too. I've gotten just beautiful fruits. You can really tell the difference. Like, wow, it really, really, really can get what it needs out of that manure. And all it is straw. Like we got wheat straw in one form. The horse manure in a very large way is just
break apart
wheat
these
straw
little apples, you'll
and
see.
grain that the horse is eating.
It's just grass.
It's just
Yeah, just grass.
It's just
grass and the wheat straw, because they'll get
They'll
some
feed them
or
like
alfalfa.
Yeah, and alfalfa you couldn't use the way we just used wheat straw. Okay, so just here's a couple of little tips about
It's very
sourcing bulk
hot.
substrate.
Yeah.
It's very hot. There's a lot of biological activity left that is going to become anaerobic in the process when you stuff that into a bag or you pile it up into a mound, right? That's gonna potentially kill your mycelium, because mycelium, really over 90 degrees, there are very few species that are going to do well, especially the mycelium. Now, they will fruit at a higher temperature, right? They might fruit in the 80s, 90s, up to 105. Ooh, now you're starting to worry because you're going to kill off your mycelium in your colonized bags, and you might not get a second fruit. But you might be able to trigger that fruit, and it might go ahead and continue on, but you'll see suffering happen if it starts getting up into those temperatures. We control that on our farm with a series of hoops and lots of shade and putting them under plants.
Multiple layers of
careful
shade and the
ways.
evaporative cooling effect of straw. Like, especially in Lake County. I mean, we're able to grow crops of mushrooms in Lake County where we have some days that are 8, 9, 10% humidity and 110 degrees, and we're growing stuff that I did want to talk about. This one thing with I'll just grab one of these things. Like, so the horse crap comes in these little apples, and in most, like, this is something I've never heard even in my group. People don't talk about. So typically you'll break this apart and compost it. They do all this stuff, and I like to not do the work. I want to do the laziest effort, as about the least amount of effort. So I started not breaking apart the little apples, these horse apples, after they're soaked, and then realized, like, I'm getting a lot less contamination because the mycelium can penetrate this very easily, but the contaminant spores aren't able to get inside of this little ball. So you've got, as soon as it eats that outer part of the apple
food that's available,
it has all that food available and absolutely no competition when it's going inside, especially if you've done any kind of treatment at all. And that is just not a real thing that people are talking about yet.
Yep.
There's a ton of magic in leaving things in their natural state, right? And that is one. And I just want you to know,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
heard it here first.
Yeah,
because somebody else
part.
is going to be like, I
realized
just
I'm standing in
discovered this. Anyway, go ahead.
So, like, how much of this stuff did you put in to inoculate that?
We do about a 10 to 20% inoculation ratio based on weight.
Weight,
Yeah, or like
Dry
a
weight.
dry weight.
dry weight?
Dry weight.
Dry
Okay.
Yeah, dry weight, so not wet weight.
So you would have already weighed your,
Yeah, so
in theory, you would
yeah.
already have weighed your straw.
People who are
Well-
doing production will do that. I never do that.
We just
I don't measure
eyeball it.
anything. For me,
It's like
honestly,
spaghetti.
like it's
How
a
much
pinch of this.
oregano are
It's
you
a
really
pinch, I
gonna
just
put
kind of
in?
look at it, and then and honestly, I'll decide on how much time. Like, do I want this to be finished off? I usually try not to do a 20%. I do 5 to 10. But if you want to have
If you wanna
that
push
mushroom
it.
quick, like, oh, I need mushrooms right away, then you'll use extra spawn, and
Is
it
there
will be faster.
Too much?
Yeah, you could get clumps of your millet grain in there, and it can become unhappy and it can contaminate in the middle, especially if you're doing a bag kit, which I really, unless you're gonna do something like recycle these
Yeah.
or collect bread bags, don't go buy poly
Right.
rolls, please,
Yeah.
and fill them with mushrooms
What we
to
do.
cut that poly. I know you can do that
We
if
did
you're
that.
going into production. We did that, but we don't do it anymore. Now we do mound culture in the garden. And there's no plastic unless we're using this. Like, there's so much free plastic.
There's a
That's
lot of
like
free pla-
there's a lot of free plastic. I'm pretty sure I could take these, turn them inside out, put them through the washing machine, pull them back out, and reuse them, and they'll be perfectly fine. I can't do that with a poly tube. You
I
know?
want to address that question a little.
Please do.
So, the higher your inoculation rate, you really have to watch out for the temperature. In this kind of temperature, you could go into a pretty high inoculation rate. You can do 20% and compensate for the chilly temps. You know, the higher you go, the more you're going to get contamination in those grains. Like, it's more susceptible to contamination in higher temperatures. I don't know why. It just works that way.
Super poetic that
The-
you just said that. Feel the bottom of this bag.
Yeah, right. It's warm in and of itself. Like,
Feel the bottom of this bag.
It's got biological activity. So,
this bag's biologically active.
so you're generating heat when you inoculated a 20% ratio. That heat, I'm glad. Yeah, it's a nice synchronicity.
Yeah, it was kind of a
we
nice
can talk about this.
synchronicity.
So,
We can kind of talk about
if you're at a 20% inoculation rate, you're going to generate so much biological heat, and if it doesn't have an environment where it can dissipate that heat, then you're going to get problems. It cooks itself. It just gets way too hot. It's a quick composting. This is live composting with the potential to get an extra yield. Like, it's not composting where you're like, oh, I did all this work and I just got dirt. No, we're composting. We're making the best soil that oh my God, it's so weird that I will cry talking about this. I don't know why. I will absolutely,
You got it.
sorry. This is why I've been fired from every job I've ever had. They're like, we love you. You're a great public speaker. And then I cry saying some stupid stuff like making soil.
That's why we're not here.
You're at home. This is a place where everybody feels that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's why we're here.
Yeah.
Oh, well.
It's all right, Daddy. Got it. So,
Sorry.
don't care.
Sorry.
Thank you, sorry for
Somebody want this one?
Yeah, it's beautiful. So making spiritual.
Yeah, it certainly is, and it's just the most amazing. It is the magic. There's something going on. Like I said, like I know some science terms I can tell you, but what in the world is that? And that you can get so much result all the way down these chains. You know, like we're talking about pasteurization. We had to heat up with propane out here tonight, but this place has got so much heat. I scavenged some solar hot water panels from an old apartment building, and you can get, just with the sun, you can get 200 degrees. It's almost boiling water coming out of there. So harvesting the sunlight, making the teas, like, you get an immediate thing that's useful from soaking the manure. If you're soaking manure, you get a tea that will feed your plants. If you're soaking the straw, you get a high tannic acid content that can strengthen the clay plasters from the clay around it. And then after the mushrooms have grown, you're taking a yield from the mushrooms. You're getting yields of mushrooms, and then you sell those if you need to, or trade them, or feed yourself. And then that is like set up to feed to the worms, your worm compost. And then you got worms and worm eggs, and you've got the best soil in the world to grow the crops that will then cycle back and feed the system over again. It's just amazing
Take
stuff.
this
Anyway.
We're going to take this and kind of pass that around. Okay.
That is truly why I get fired. I've been fired for every important job. They'll be like, that's a loose cannon move there for you.
Well, don't focus on that.
But it
You're
led me
not
here,
fired from
so.
this job.
I can't
you've
get fired
got-
from this job,
That's
right?
right.
Like, 'cause it's going to be over in 2 hours.
It's beautiful. It's a beautiful process. It's hard not to get emotional, especially when you're making it.
Well, when you realize, the previous speaker, I can't remember her name,
Lisa.
was talking about waves. I always look at you're creating the wave that you can also ride, and it is such when you can think of the magnitude and of the impact and the power of the wave of mycelium and soil and life and productivity that gets generated. It really is an overwhelming. I think that's the first reason I grew the mushrooms. When I was a teenager, and you eat these mushrooms, and you feel like this is such immense power in the possibility of this.
Thank you. All right. So, what I just passed around to you. That's
What are we
awesome.
looking at?
So we're looking at a few things. I passed around a bunch of stuff because this is the phase that we're moving into now in our conversation. You guys okay to move on? How do we feel? Are we engaged? Should we stop? What do we want to do?
No,
Just
Great.
Keep going. Okay.
one more question about that
Yeah, go ahead.
thing. How long, when you were pasteurizing the substrate over there?
Yeah.
How long do you have it in the hot water for?
In the hot water for about an hour, hour and a half.
Okay.
Thank you.
And you could leave it it's one of those things. It's kind of it's not so important when it comes out of the water. Once it's pasteurized, as long as you hit it in the net, by the time it cools down, you should pull it out. But you could leave it overnight, and it's not a problem.
Okay.
Yeah.
You could go to sleep. You could put it in, and I do that frequently. So.
Yeah. So what I just passed around, I passed around a few things. The last thing I passed around was either this, which is the Paul Stammates, I believe, version,
So you're going to be buying. We're talking about
or
Auger.
another brand we got from like a health food store. I don't know. Just get whatever looks good. Okay. So, Ray, can you tell us the recipe for how?
Hold it.
What are
Oh, hold it.
Should we
Recipe
talk
for
about
what?
what we're gonna tell you what we're gonna tell you? We're gonna tell you what we're gonna tell you.
We're gonna
Right now
tell
it
you
looks
what we're
like
gonna tell you.
we're
I
going.
might have failed to announce where we're going.
Yes.
Yeah,
So
let's
okay,
go
let
there.
me go back. I can fix it. So, you just fruited your mushrooms. I talked earlier about expanding your production and continuing your genetics for what you've got, right? This is an important thing, seed saving. Okay? Will you check on Chance? Okay. So, after you have fruited, guess what you have? You have seeds. You have spores. You can take one of your mushrooms from your garden and you can collect it and you can place it gills side down on a piece of aluminum foil. Now, I don't know what kind of spores he has in here, so I don't want to open them up because it might be special to him. Right? These might be some interesting genetics that we don't want to fuck around and find out. So I don't know what's in here. So that being said, there's a spore print in here that I think Ray had intended to show you guys, but he also had intended to actually do a clean catch transfer to demonstrate how easy it is to look, we just brought this from home, we set this up, and we were going to do a clean catch transfer that we were going to take home and utilize in our production, right? I don't know what he has in here. This could be something that he's trying to push a genetic that he knows fruited really, really well or was resistant or something like that.
This is that guy Cohen sent me Dalton sent me a
spore print
spore print of Garden Giant.
of Garden Giant. Okay, so that is kind of an important one for us. So
This is hot water?
what you do is you've got now your spore print.
Are you the
We're going to talk
are you
about
the chef?
How did you get the spore print?
So we laid the mushroom gills side down. These particular mushrooms have gills. Other mushrooms have other sporulation mechanisms, right? So do you guys understand how mushrooms reproduce?
It's the journey of the spore.
Journey of the spore. So the mushroom, the fruit that we typically look at and eat and consume and dry and do all these things to, that's actually the reproductive mechanism of the mushroom. It's its sexual reproduction. So within that, in the gill system for these particular types of mushrooms, there's
just the film
spores.
guy.
So when you lay that flat down a piece of foil underneath a mushroom that's about to open up and fruit, you're going to catch that sporulation. And you're going to take that very carefully. You're going to take it over. You're going to cover it. You're going to take it to your lab, and you're going to swab that onto several agar plates, which is nutritive in nature because you've added nutrients. We take organic dog food, we put it in a coffee grinder, we mix it in with our agar, we lay that into we have 2 techniques. We passed around a jar. Not everybody has Petri dishes laying around, and not all of us have the ability to go and buy a bunch of Petri dishes. Jar tech.
Yeah, there's your Petri dish.
Usable, or you can use it as many times as you want.
You can use it as many times.
Those are so old. I think those things are seriously over a couple of decades.
Yeah, our lids are all
Exactly.
rusted.
Right.
Right.
But yeah, like, totally. Like,
You could buy a new lid if you want to.
You could,
make,
but
like,
it's
you know,
perfectly
you
fine.
can put some aluminum foil on there too. I mean, really, like.
Yeah, true. True.
Yeah, yeah. It's just not that
There,
big of a
there are
deal.
plenty of
But-
lids though out there, and then ours are old and rusty and whatever. You know,
We use Tyvek because it's breathable. Because why? Remember?
everybody can get federal
Mushroom.
support for your mushroom growing project.
They want us
basically.
doing
They will
this.
buy your filters. You know,
So
like, ooh,
they want you growing mushrooms. They want you growing your oysters.
I don't think they want us ripping those apart, so let's don't do that on
Okay,
camera.
well,
Right.
you know, it's fine. So
We have never done
we're
that.
talking about
Ever.
free home grower tech, right? We're talking about growing food for people who don't have money,
Yeah.
right?
Because we're those people.
We are those people. Okay, so you're gonna take one envelope from them. This is not production level stuff. You're taking one envelope. You're gonna cut it up. You're gonna use it to cover your jars so you can make some food at home. It's not
All the ones we've used were actually mailed
reuse
to
one
us.
if you feel like you're doing something
we-
wrong, right? You
I
do
didn't go and
something
get.
all the time.
They were all mailed to me.
That's right. They were, yeah, it's priority. This is a priority. This is a priority. So we're gonna take jar tech, and we have with us some petri dishes,
Yeah.
right? So those are your 2 options.
use
for
petri dishes,
your
too.
agar plates. You're gonna take your spore and your spores, and you're gonna use your tool.
You guys want to pass them around and
We
check them
did.
out?
We did.
Oh, you already
Yeah,
did?
we did. I was ahead of
I
you.
was over there.
This is
I was getting
a
coffee.
germination loop or a what do you call it?
It's an inoculation loop.
Inoculation
It's a little
loop.
teeny wire.
It's a little teeny wire.
And you can scrape the spores and
Off of
put it
your
onto your
aluminum
agar
foil.
plate with that. You can also use
You can use
any
a
old
pair
thing
of
you can use.
tweezers.
you
You
can
can
use
use-
a piece of baling wire,
You can use a piece of baling wire.
which I have done.
You can
many
use a
times.
fingernail
So
file.
your auger, you said dog, you mix it up with dog food?
We
What
mix
else?
up. Ray, why don't you tell them
What
the
is-
recipe for the agar?
Yeah, we'll use dog food. I actually brought, like, here it is. It's ground up. This is some dog food.
You will
Like,
need a gram scale.
You grind it up in the blender, or, you know, I would buy a specialized coffee grinder so you're not like blending your coffee with your dog food and mixing it up. But yeah, it's just powdered dog food, which gives you a great nutrient profile that you can switch up frequently without messing around too much. You just buy a different brand, because mushrooms like to,
both hands.
they get used to a substrate and they get a little weak. You know, they like to be exposed to a variety of different things. So professional mushroom growers will use things like malt agar, and they'll get very fancy recipes with stuff that's just not readily available to me. And
And again, it's like
dog
generally
food.
expensive. You have to order it through the mail. You can't find it in a place like this.
yeah, you don't need all that. You need some
Yeah.
agar, and you can buy from Paul Stamets. We had 2 different brands. I just wanted to show, like,
Yeah,
you know,
we did.
Here's the specialized agar from Paul Stamets, right here. Specialized agar from Paul Stamets. Great stuff. I love you, Paul. You're a great guy. But you can also go to Amazon and buy some cheaper agar. That's just agar from the health food store or from Amazon, and use that too. And then it was Paul Stamets' book that turned me on to the dog food. You know, just basic dog food, ground up, 10 grams for a half a liter, 20 grams for a full liter of the agar and the dog food, 20 grams a piece. So 40 grams total solids going in, and then that's your agar recipe. To make agar is kind of a detailed thing. We were going to go into it. I don't
We
know. if
were
we're
going to
gonna-
go into it. I don't. We can schedule another class. We can have you
can
out
do
to
some of
our
this
farm
tomorrow,
in
too.
small groups if you would like to come to our
Definitely
to
love
our
that.
lab
Love
and
that.
we can show
Yeah.
you how to do all of this stuff. That would be amazing. You would then also need this kind of interesting stuff. This is called
Yeah, with petri
parafilm.
dishes, it's really important to use this
Oh, yeah.
parafilm material that will seal your plates.
Yeah,
I don't use it with these. It's like, this is so much easier in a way.
and
like,
cheaper, just so much more effective.
So jars.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Ray, what is the process for preparing your agar? What do you do first? Like, say for instance, we have a little bit of agar sitting in the bottom of this, and it's actually a great example of what will happen if you get your agar wet. That's a bad idea. This stuff's like gelatin.
Well, you don't want to get it wet before you
Before
mix
you're
it.
getting ready to mix it, right? So I'm going to pass this bottle around because look at the bottom of it. And by the way, it is like gelatin. If you've ever worked with gelatin, it's gooey, it's going to get hard and gummy. You're going to have a hard time breaking that apart. It's going to just be gross. So you're going to have to throw that out now. You're going to have to reach in there with a baby bottle scrubber and kind of really clean it out. And it's going to come out in a clump, very similar to what you see happen in a Petri dish. It's like a gelatin goop, it's all gummed up. So you don't want to get it wet before you're going to use it. And when you mix it, what's your water to agar ratio again? It's how many liters or milliliters? 500 milliliters.
A half a liter, 500 milliliters to 10 grams of agar, and 10 grams of dog food.
10 grams of dog food. And how hot do you want the water to be when you go in to mix this up?
I just boil water and I will mix it in, and before I sterilize it. A lot of people don't do that. I don't always have to do it, but when you're doing this jar, it's sort of a no pour. So when you're doing Petri dishes, you will sterilize the Petri dish dry, and we'll pull it out, and then this will be sterilized alongside of your Petri dish run, and you will pour into the Petri dish and then close it. It's very hard to move around a Petri dish if you were to pre-pour it and not spill it through the unsealed edge, right? But these have this benefit of they seal up. You can close
move them around,
but you need to do you need to pre-melt your agar so that you can pour it in. So I'll just take boiling water from a tea kettle and close it up and shake it around and basically melt the agar into its liquid state before it's sterilized. Pour it into each dish, and I like to do a nice thick layer because then you're also buffered from humidity loss. Like if you're in a dry room with a real thin layer of agar, it can dry out your mycelium. If you do a thick layer, you get a moisture reservoir so the mycelium won't dry out.
And can I bring up an important point when you're dealing with Petri dishes? One of the things that happens to people, they get a lot of contamination in their Petri dishes, and the problem is oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes is you've got temperature fluctuations in your room. And what that will do is it will cause a condensation to form, and you can see it's forming condensation just because I picked it up. It was dry when I picked it up. Just the warmth of my
Standing
hand.
water equals bacteria and mushroom growth. So you want to stay away from
yeah.
temperature swings that cause condensation in anything that you're growing in, and it's just containing stuff is never.
Yeah.
That's why I don't like growing in containers or indoors anymore. Like as soon as you contain something, I mean, mushrooms are like us. Who likes to be really contained? No, we don't. It doesn't work. It's not nice.
But this is a little bit kinder. This is a little bit more forgiving.
It's got a lot more air and air exchange.
Hi, cuteness.
Hey.
Yeah. So you can see the so those temperature fluctuations when you're working with these. Where do you want to store your agar once you've inoculated it? And you're waiting for it to colonize. What temperature do you want to have this holding at?
It depends on what the mushroom is. Whatever its preferred temperature is, you want to get into its narrow range and hold it right there. You don't want it to go back and forth.
So for the oyster, it's going to be one thing. For for your Stropharia, it's going to be another. For Maitake, it's going to be another. For Shiitake, it's going to be another. Right? They all have a slightly different.
Yeah, there's usually like a 4 or 5
desirable
degree temperature range for
And
each one.
different
Most of them are in the
strains
70 to
oysters will have a
76
different
range.
temperature parameter. So you want to find out what you're working with, find out what your space can provide without having to do a bunch of alterations, right? We brought cold weather mushrooms for this particular inoculation process because these ones are okay. They live on the coast. They sometimes endure a freeze. They grow here in California. You'll find these all up and down the coast here in very, very, very cold, frigid temperatures. It's the blue oyster. It's okay in cold. If I brought a pink oyster, which is a tropical species of the oyster mushroom, it's going to fail. We're going to have to work really hard to keep that alive, right? So find something that works where you are at in the environment that you know you can create with ease. Same thing like if you're growing anything else. You wouldn't want to grow tomatoes in the winter. You'd be battling that, right? So just logical thinking. So you boil this, you get it your agar set. How
and then you
long?
pour it in there.
And you pour it in there.
You pour it in the jar if you're doing the no
Put
pour.
it in the jar with the spores.
No.
No, that has to get sterilized,
Good
Okay,
question.
wait.
right?
Good question.
So,
Good question.
yeah, that's a great question.
Yeah.
I'm glad you asked that
Thank
question.
you.
Is the dog food?
The dog food's in there.
Okay, so
Yep.
you would like mix the agar with the dog food
Equal
before
parts.
you mix it with the water.
All right, so right now I've got equal parts dog food and agar in there. I was going to do a half liter, so I got 10 grams of agar, and I have 10 grams of ground dog food. I will take the hot water of the amount that I need, half liter, and I will shake that and melt it
Okay.
because I'm going to go in there. It really is a good way to do it, even if you're not going to do a pre-pour. I like doing that. Make sure that it's all mixed because when it heats up, you're going to have to stir it when it comes out after the sterilization process. And when I say comes out, we're going to take that, all of these dishes and all this stuff, we're going to put it in a pressure cooker or what people call a sterilizer. The difference being
autoclave.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and so when it comes out of the sterilization, then we're going to pour it from there. But I really believe that it is best to take hot water that you're going to use, and shake it up and melt it before it goes into the sterilization process. Even though that's really not typical, I don't think a lot of people they'll shake it after it comes out of the sterilizer still hot and mix it at that point. But I just like the.
Yeah.
I like
the
to get it
pre-mixing
pre-mixed
is
and
good.
see it. Like, oh,
Yeah.
there it is. That's the way I like it. I like to see it.
So another important thing is if you're in the process of doing this and you get a phone call and you've got a bunch of agar sitting in a jar that you think is going to wait for you, it won't. It'll set.
Yeah, you got to
You'll
be
come
like
back.
there are a lot of these processes, and it will teach you about life. Doing anything in life is going to teach you about the rest of life. Like there are windows of opportunity, and if you do not hit it in that window, you will lose it. It'll gel up. You'll never bring that back.
Yeah.
And like and with agar, you try to reheat it and send it back through the sterilizing.
No, that won't work.
And it's too much heat, and it'll caramelize, and like, now my sugar, like the.
Yeah, it just
You
gets
just-
all weird. You just wasted it, and that's fine. But just as a warning, you'll want to move through that process and set aside that time. So, how
And if
much
you mess it
time
up,
do
don't
you have?
grieve. Just hit it again. Just keep going.
Just keep going. Fuck around and
You
find
know,
out.
like,
Keep doing it.
don't worry
just
about
keep
it.
doing it. Keep trying. About how long do you have to let this be before you will have that problem of it gelling on you? Maybe 20 minutes, 15 minutes.
I don't know. I never have
10
done.
minutes.
I've done. I do that so rarely. Like you gotta grab it as soon. You don't want to pour it too hot because it'll cause condensation. If you pour it
So
too
that's
hot,
mild?
you get it in your dishes. You're gonna get condensation on the top of that dish. The top. So you want to wait until you can hold it without letting go with an ungloved hand, and in that, again, using the body as your measurement device.
Have you scoot over? And I'm gonna pretend I'm right.
You gonna sit down?
I'm gonna sit down. I'm gonna take now I've got agar in here. I got all my dishes, my flow hood's on.
Oh wait,
Got
before you say, so this is the way you do it when you have a lab and you like these are the official
Right.
the Elmeyer flask or whatever. When you're Ray and Patty, you'll just use the kombucha bottle for your agar
It works just
bottle.
fine, and we get to reuse something that we bought at the
better.
store.
it's kind
a
of
lot
it's
of
nice,
times.
I mean,
Lots and lots of times. We reuse them all the time. I make my tinctures in there. I make my hibiscus teas in there. I make all kinds of stuff in those bottles. I'm not gonna go to whatever it is and buy whatever it is. I'm gonna use
Be ready
that.
for
So, paid $10 for that bottle.
well, if you're gonna do this, you might as well like do the.
Well, so say for instance, I'm
You're gonna
here.
work
I'm
in front
I'm
of the
front
flow
my
hood.
flow hood.
You're gonna wait. You need. Okay, so this flow hood, it blows out a laminar flow. This is non-turbulent air, so any spore trying to get in here is going to get knocked away in the very tip, at the very edge. Any spore trying to get in here is going to get blown, or any bacteria is going to get blown away and out of your way. So you have a sterile zone here in front of this fan, and a lot of mushroom growers put a little wire rack to elevate petri dish work.
Right, because look,
here.
I'm out of the flow.
Yeah, you're stuck in no man's land, possibly some turbulent air there. But
Right.
I use this thing, and I have for a long, long time. This is like an
Also
old
a
electric grill,
recycle
and I'll
thing.
just spray it with alcohol and stick it right there.
So
This
now
is my
we're
main.
in the flow.
Now you're You're in the flow. You're out of any turbulence possible at the lower
That's
section of that.
Right. So now I have my agar-agar. It's been sterilized. I can barely touch the bottle. It's probably 190 degrees or so. It's pretty hot still. I'm probably wearing like gloves or an oven mitt or something like that. But it's to the degree that it's no longer like, 212. Ray, show them that like thermometer, that thermal thermometer, the yellow one. Is it there? Do we have it?
I got this one.
That's the one. So we will use this in our lab to see where things are at, so we have some precision, right? I'm going to point this, and we're going to see how cold.
cold.
This is 44 degrees right now.
It could turn to ice right now.
It could turn to pretty cold in here.
We're not far from that.
Yeah. So what's this? This is at 39 degrees because it's metal. So when I use this in the lab on my agar-agar, it's about 205 degrees is where I can kind of handle and pour it using something that's not going to make me fumble it like an oven mitt. Okay, so I've got my plates here. These also got wrapped in foil and sterilized because that's the order of operations for your agar plates. When you're working with plates, you got to sterilize the plates
Yeah, those are coming out of the sterilizer.
and the agar together. Now I've got this sterile capture. With these, I'm going to do it the opposite way. I'm going to pour my unsterile agar in here. I'm going to stack these up in the pressure cooker and I'm going to sterilize it like that. So slightly different processes. Now that I've got this nice clean thing, it's kind of fragile because I'm trying to keep it clean. So I've got this flow hood, I've got this. I'm going to try to work pretty quick. I'm going to have this ready. I'm going to grab this down. I'm going to pour, cover, slide it over. Pour, cover, slide it over. The reason I'm going to do it like that is because I don't want this surface to get contaminated.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I don't want that surface to get contaminated. It's fragile, it's nutritive, it's ready for something to get on it and just eat it up and ruin my day. I don't want that.
And that's where you really see the power of this fan. If you open up those dishes outside of that flow, even for a few moments, and you close it back and you set it aside, it'll grow out all kinds of crazy looking stuff. But
You'll
you
be
can
very
open it
unhappy.
and close it. And
Yeah. But now I've got these. I grew these out in my lab. This is from my garden. I'm so excited because now I'm going to move my seeds to the next phase. I'm going to create spawn like what I have in that bag. And I'm going to do it on this grain. It's
That's wheat
not
grain.
dry like
You can
this.
use a lot of different kinds of grains for the spawn.
I have to
production.
prepare this grain. The process of preparing this grain, many people do it many ways. Some people just like to soak it and kind of watch for readiness and kind of feel it. You got to crack that membrane and you got to hydrate it because mushrooms love water. So if I put mushrooms into some dry stuff, it's not going to take off because it needs that water to survive. Like any organism, it needs the water. But it needs the water at a rate that's very special. If I over soak these and they turn into mushy cereal like what I'd eat for oatmeal, I'm going to have high contamination rates of bacteria and it's going to be disgusting. If I hydrate it not enough, then I'm going to probably see mold develop because the mushroom's going to take too long to colonize because it didn't have enough water. So it's kind of a fine point thing. This is something that you really kind of have to get a little bit of a feel for. We've made lots of videos about it. You can go on, the mushroom growing group. Lots of people talk about it. You can go in, grain spawn, preparation, tons of information in the group about that. And we also made some videos and stuff like that we're in the process of editing. You can also come to the farm and cook up a couple pots of grain with us and have fun doing it. So that's one thing. Ray, being the genius that he is, let's see one of those raw jars that doesn't have any inoculant. Do we have one of those sitting around?
Yep.
No. The grain.
Oh.
Where is that? Did I leave it outside?
Yep.
I left it outside. One of the cool things, and you can kind of see it in here, there's these little shiny pieces of something in here that look like little pieces of gold. That's vermiculite. Vermiculite is great. It's a great thing and it's a hard thing because you're bringing something in as an input. But if you need to rescue a batch of grain that you overhydrated, you can put a little bit of vermiculite in there, and it's gonna rescue your grain because it's gonna go in there and it's gonna help suck that out. It's very absorbative, and it's gonna help create space and create air and prevent things from clumping together. And that's gonna allow you to kind of not have to throw this grain away or, throw it right out into the garden to be compost, right? So that's what you're gonna do now. We're gonna take this, we're gonna soak it. That's part of that preparation process. If you soak it in just water, it could take how many hours? How many minutes of just soaking, no heat?
Oh, I don't do it that way, but people will do 12-hour soaks for certain grains. Depends on
the
grain. A 24-hour soak.
You can use any grain, not just wheat berry. You can use rye berry. You can use corn.
You know, it's
You can use brown rice. Right? You can use any grain. So we like this one. It's nice, it's big, it's plump, it's easy to work with. You can use millet. Millet's more fragile.
millet.
What do you have
Milo.
in there? Wheat berries?
Wheat
that?
berries are good.
Yeah, these are wheat berries.
These are wheat berries,
Yeah.
right? So we do it because we like to actually do it with a little bit of heat. We like to cook it a little bit like a cereal kind of. And we do that keeping it at a low simmer for how many minutes once it starts simmering?
It's about 10, but it's really to taste. You know, you kind of like you have to do it. Maybe we could do it tomorrow.
Maybe if we have
possibly
time.
with the
Maybe
thing,
we'll
but-
have one going in the morning,
Yeah.
and we can kind of show you guys this process because it's an important part of the reproductive process of being set free to grow your
It's
own.
something you really have to get a feel for, and it helps to have somebody with you at it, you know, where you get it at just the right hydration. You want it as full as possible. So each grain has a
Field capacity.
well, that's not true. You know, each grain has a shell. You know, it's got the husk around it, or what? It's not the husk. It's the membrane around the wheat germ, or you know, around the starchy part of the seed. You want that to swell almost to the point where it will break, because you get as much moisture in there for the mycelium to access as possible. But if you break that membrane, you're exposing all that gooey starch that bacteria love. So that membrane is a real antibacterial asset in that closed container of the jar.
Same thing like with your horse apples. You've got this exterior that the mycelium is very good at puncturing, but the bacteria is not so good at puncturing. The bacteria kind of needs easy access, right? But the mycelium can kind of
Well, also spores, like
and spores.
it's keeping
It's
spores from
keeping
getting
spores
into
at
that
bay.
center. It's kind
Yep.
of amazing.
And so it eats around the outside, and then by the time it eats around the outside, it's colonized the inside and it's already digesting it, right? So that's an important aspect to what you're doing. So you don't want that to burst. If you can pick it up with your fingers and you get mush, that's gonna maybe
And which
be,
is what I did, like on these jars. I was trying out a new thing. I was doing it under pressure because I had been playing around with cooking grain spawn with an Instapot, and had great success. And then I broke the Instapot because I ran it without water. I turned it on, and it somehow was like fried my Instapot. So I'm out, and then I was like, well, I'll just do the pressure in my bigger and I poured like poured like 20 pounds in there, and I overcooked it, man. It blew up every single grain. It was all just goop when I came out, but I mixed it with enough vermiculite, and we're doing okay. You know, like there's always like there's ways to save your mess ups, and
Yeah,
you know,
you
there's
can
ways
save
to
it.
go
And-
back.
and
You know,
there's
it's not always such a loss.
You've got
So,
food for your compost pile. It's like, you know, that's worst comes to worst. You can just feed it.
so where are we at in this talk? We've talked about how to make the.
Now you've prepared your grain. You're going to put it into your jars. We like to use slightly bigger jars. You'll notice those are quart jars. That's a good size. You try to scale up and use half-gallon jars, you might find that you're going to be real sad if one of your jars contaminates and you've wasted a huge portion of your grain in this jar that went bad. So controlling your failure rate is also about not trying to make things too big. Control how much of something you put into a given jar.
Can I say something?
Yeah, please do.
I want to tell you that, yes, that's true with that glass jar. Some reason those half-gallon jars, but they make these really great bags.
Oh, yep. And then
And
there's also
if you're
these.
gonna do it large, it's just you're gonna,
Yeah, 'cause
you're
we
gonna
did
use
this
these bags that have a
commercially.
really good air gasket that breathes, and you can put a lot of grain in these. And if you're transferring into a large amount, you really need to make sure that the grain jar. So you'll put in 5 quarts of grain in one of these bags, and you'll inoculate not with an auger wedge. So we're
don't go into that liquid culture thing.
no, I'm not going into the liquid
Okay,
culture.
'cause that'll
I'm
be
just saying
confusing.
we kind of didn't graduate like from the auger stage into the grain making stage. We didn't
That's what
explain.
we did.
But what happens is you pour these plates, you get them all. The mycelium grows out like this onto this surface of agar. Then you have to cut little pieces and transfer it into these grain jars that we're talking about. Like you'll have a
Right, but you need to sterilize your grain. So you've prepared your grain. It's been soaked. It's hydrated. You need to put it in your jars, whatever you're going to use, whether it's a bag.
I'm just gonna get. I have some of those.
Yeah, bring them. Thank you. Because I didn't have my prop. Because we want to show you exactly what we're thinking. So these are quart jars, right? We fill them up a portion of the way, and there's a few reasons why we don't fill them up all the way, because you're going to have oxygen issues. So that's what Ray's talking about when he's talking about these bags with the filter, right? Because this is an oxygen filter. These bags, you guys noticed there were those stripes on them? These white stripes? It's not tape. That's an oxygen patch to allow this mycelium to breathe. It's very important that you don't suffocate your mushrooms, right? So this is an oxygen patch. This is a grain jar that Ray produced that we were going to sterilize, or we might have sterilized today.
Yeah, you can look at it. Here's your cooked grain. I got a little worm in there because that was overcooked from that overcooked batch.
Right, so you want to leave enough space in here for oxygen exchange to happen, and because you're gonna when it's colonizing, you're gonna. And I don't want to do that to your jar.
Where did that really the good colonized jar, the big half-gallon?
Oh, it's on our table. There it is. Yeah. So you're gonna break it up a little bit and expose new food. Right? So now it doesn't even look like it's colonized anymore.
But here you can see how the mycelium
Yeah.
colonizes the grain and turns it into one. Most of you probably have some experience with this. If I'm,
So you take the agar, you take a little piece of the agar and you just put it in there, or do you have to do anything with the syringe?
the syringes, are for liquid cultures.
Yeah,
This
Or
is
a spore
you just
print.
Take it and you stick it in there.
Right.
And then shake it up.
Correct.
Yep.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, but you have to sterilize this grain. You have to put this in a
Sterilize
pressure
it.
cooker.
Right.
Yeah.
And then when it cools down,
And then when it cools down, you're going to go ahead and inoculate it with
That's
a
right.
little sliver of your agar,
you'll cut a wedge.
where you see you've got nice clean growth. Now, when you're working from spore, you might have a situation where part of your dish got contaminated. Well, what if you're working with genetics that you're really trying to save? Sometimes we're doing that. Sometimes it's so special to us that we're like, oh, this plate, it's the only plate I have. This was the only spore print I had. I traveled somewhere, Central South America, whatever. Somebody mentioned Alan Rockefeller earlier. This would be something that Alan would do. He would say, I'm going to clean up this culture. Have you guys ever heard somebody say that, talking about mushrooms or other tissue culture or that kind of thing, right? Yes. Tissue culture in plants. I'm going to clean up this culture. So what you're going to do is you're going to keep growing it out on agar. You're going to keep moving it along in that process until you have a plate that comes out that's pristine.
Yeah.
And then you can transfer it to grain. If you've got a contaminated petri dish of any kind and you open it up in front of a flow hood after you've sterilized your grain and you move a piece of that to your nice sterilized grain, guess what you're going to get? Contamination.
So when am I adding the spore to the agar?
You can't
Or
I wouldn't add a spore. Oh, adding a spore to the agar? Go ahead.
Or I'm just confused. Like, we've done the agar with the dog food and put it in a dish, and then we're doing the grains.
Well, no.
No.
So you missed a step. We're going to take our spore print,
Oh yeah.
which is on
that's
this
what
little
I'm
piece of
confused
foil.
about.
Yeah, we skipped
When
it.
are
We
doing
skipped
that?
this part.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. I think we went. Yeah. We just haven't done
Like
this
how?
in a long time.
And I'm stoned. Why did I smoke that
Here,
weed?
come-
God damn it, Patty. Okay, back up.
with this, so you have your
sterilize your agar.
you have your agar, you have your plates. The plates are gelled and you know,
they're
you
ready.
poured them and they're ready.
They're firm.
Okay.
Thank you.
Then you will open them. That's what I was saying.
Yeah, this is like somebody who's like a master's degree, like skips over, like, oh, you got to proof it. You're like, you don't need to know about that. Yeah. So now.
That's okay, like,
yeah,
here-
that's okay. No, that's good. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
Can I do this one?
Yeah, please do this part.
So here we are. We've got our agar melted and it's come out and I felt it and it's nice and cool to the touch. Boom! I pour my plates. Boom! 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 I actually leave them stacked. I leave them stacked because that condensation won't happen. You'll have condensation happen on the top one, but everything underneath is insulated with a heat barrier going up. So like if you keep your plates unstacked, and when I pour, I'll take my stack and I'll lift them up like this. Boom! I pour. Boom! I pour. Boom, I pour. Boom, I pour. There's not a lot of excess table space. Those will sit now. I've got to say I got like 50 of these plates sitting there. They gel up. They're hard now. That you see the substance in there, it's gelled. It's ready to go. Forget that white mycelium is on there. So I have my gelled up plates.
Will you leave this running the whole
This is
time?
always running. This is
Always running.
This is running. Then we get our spore print. Here's our spore print. I'll show you not just the aluminum foil. I can take it apart and show
See,
you.
I
the
didn't
spore.
know if it was a special spore print because you were not in the room and I didn't want to open it
Yeah, this is
because I
it.
didn't know where it was
It's
from.
special enough spore print right here, right? And I'll
Can we
and you'll
pass
lay
it around? Now that you
But,
opened
well, can I want to show first, all right? Okay. So the flow is going. I keep the most sterile aspects of the work closest to the flow, right? This is the most dirty thing. This is from outside. You would never want to put your spore print here and your dishes there because you're going to blow unsterile stuff. So everything has to be the cleanest to the dirtiest in the thing. You know, you're penetrating with your hand, which should be relatively clean, and you're going over in your area. You got to do that. So you take this flow hood. Where's my flamethrower? Where's that thing?
Oh, it might be outside because we were using it to. I'll go grab it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, pretend right now I've got a propane torch, or there are lab pieces of gear called bacticinerators, and you'll stick it in there. And so I use a propane torch just from Walmart, and you will light this thing up. It'll glow red hot. You will then take it before you dip into the spores here, because this is what we're going to use to inoculate the spores into the agar, right? So you'll open up and you'll dive your loop into the agar, which will make a nice little crackling, sizzling sound, and it will cool off the loop so that now you can touch the spores without destroying them as you're touching them, right? And then I will just take it and scrape. And I really wish I had all the, man, we'll have to do this again one day where it's all just like all set up and we can actually do it. Yeah, you can see. I'll just show you because it's nice and pretty visual thing here. You put your loop in there, and I'll just keep it in until it glows red, you know, and I'll kind of go, see that? So nice and pretty. And yeah, and then,
How important
So-
is it for you to let that cool off?
well, it's super important. We just went over that. You cool it off
Okay.
by diving it into the agar. The agar will instantly, it'll make a tss, and boil that agar a little bit. And then, a lot of people do streaks. Everybody's got a technique for doing the spore print and the spore inoculation. I will just do a stab right next to where I cooled it off in the middle. And I'll take a heavily inoculated spore and I'll just stab it right in the middle. And then I don't have a lot of space where I'm going to see contamination possibly in a streak. But a lot of people do, especially if you have a real lab, you can do things that you won't do when you're doing your stuff in dirty environments. Like I have my labs in workspaces like this in places with carpet and mold on the windowsills and everything, you know, like,
Well, in a home,
got-
and you're standing home. When I say lab, I mean
yeah, you're in a
house.
room in a house or in the barn or
in a
out.
bedroom that we've dedicated to this process.
But
Okay,
the
we live in the house. We've got dogs. We've got cats.
yeah, there's dander everywhere, whatever. But anyway, yeah, so you'll do that, and then you'll put a little dot of spores right in the middle of that agar plate, and boom, you're done. That's how you do it. So that is spore.
Yeah, okay,
That's
good.
moving the spores into the plate. You will also, to get to this stage, you can also take a pre-existing plate, and then we will use a different tool. We'll use the scalpel. So I've got something that was either from a spore or from another culture, and you use a scalpel and cut out a piece of this mycelium tissue. That's called mycelium. These are mycelial threads in there. It's hyphae. And you cut out just a very small amount and then transfer it and put it right in the center of your fresh agar dish, and it will grow out radially from there. That's what you're seeing. So if you look at that, you'll see a little piece of agar right in the middle where all of that mycelium radiated from. We could pass that around again. And this one too, you'll see the piece that was the inoculant into that agar dish, and it's radially going out.
So that's called an agar to agar transfer.
So you got a spore germination into agar dish, or you're doing agar to agar transfers.
You can also do a tissue transfer. You could also grab like a little piece
Right, you can
of
take
mushroom.
you can take a chunk of the mushroom itself.
Is there a like a benefit to one way or the other, or like is it like when you clone stuff too many times and then your plant sucks?
Well, I never have. So here's my experience. I will develop a strain, and I should have been naming them all along, but I just do it. I'll develop a strain. I'll breed and select, and I'll do it all in a very short amount of time. Like give me 3 months, and I'll have a few strains that I've selected, and I'll run those into a growing season because I grow outdoors, and those will run, and I'll usually let them die because like storing them over winter is just a hassle to me. I don't do
Doing it outside.
and then so when that season dies out, I usually don't carry through my strains. I'll just make some more, and it is really something I wish I'd have not done. There are ways to store those strains, and and benefit from the work that you've done. I just never do. I'll start over from a multi-spore and then select, but you can hitchhike, so you can grow out your clone, and then clone from one of those, and clone from one of those, and I've done that. It just goes on. I don't know how many times I've skipped that stone, because that's how I look at it. Like
Right. That's kind of like what nature does.
Yeah.
well, what nature does, it continues to produce spores. So like most of what you're seeing in nature is actually a multi-spore
whole
event.
new-
Like this,
Yeah.
those are usually spores that have traveled through the air and the wind and landed somewhere. And the funny thing with spores, to get a fruiting body, you have to have 2 spores that make it. So like, it has to go with a companion and and germinate, and then meet another.
Like a spore, like an egg and a sperm. You need 2.
Yeah, for as far as I know, maybe there's a mushroom that doesn't need a union. So in the journey of the spore, a spore will germinate, and a spore will germinate. Those little dots, they're tiny little microscopic ovoid thing, like ovals, and they will shoot out threads, and then 2 will meet. 2 threads will meet. They will not form a mushroom, at least with the ones that I grow, until those 2 threads meet. They meet, and they're like, "Hey, I know you. You're me. Let's clamp up," and they form what we call a clamp connection, and you'll get a hyphal knot. Every hyphal knot is a potential place for fruiting to happen. So that sexual union, or whatever, I don't think it is sexual, but that union is a spot where a new fruiting body, a mushroom, can happen, and that's and then it just keeps on doing that. They'll split. Those threads will keep going out and coming back together, and going out and coming back together, and you get this tightly woven strands. This is really amazing stuff. Like, look at these. You can see the hyphal. I call them feet. Like if you'll look on the jar, you can see the ropes of the rhizomorphic nature of this mycelium growing across it.
It's really cool.
So
with the agar, just a question. With
Yeah.
the agar, after you do it, you put the spores into it, and you did that thing. Did you say we also supposed to pasteurize that?
No,
No, it's not
that's
pasteurized, just the grain.
already been sterilized.
When
Now
has it
you're
been
gonna.
sterilized?
It's been sterilized, not pasteurized. Pasteurization is a process that is very different from
Right, that is
sterilization.
okay.
Right,
Yes,
pasteurization,
thank you.
you're just beating back
Sterilizing,
the
you're talking about just making
competitors.
sure everything's really clean and
Right.
sterile when you're putting stuff.
But-
well, no,
okay.
sterilized,
Pasteur-
you mean we're actually running it through a high heat beyond 212 degrees. You're getting up to like 200.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so when you're sterilizing, you are working to kill everything.
Okay.
It's done. Like sterile means nothing has survived.
So
Pas-
before you put your spores in there, you do that.
you do
process.
that process because if you did that after, you'd kill them.
Okay. Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
Right. Yep. So you want to, yeah. So and then one thing that I see Ray do all the time. So he'll take these, and you guys noticed on the one that we passed around, it was all taped closed, right? So after you've inoculated it, you've got to put some parafilm around it to close it up and seal it up because this is fairly fragile and there's air exchange going on. So that parafilm, and the reason you can't use duct tape is because it would starve it of oxygen. So you have to use something that's breathable that also gets a good seal all the way around the edge. So that parafilm, when you're working with petri dishes, it's you can't get away from it. You have to use it. Once you've done that and you've gotten them all covered up, now mind you, you're parafilming, you're doing all of this in front of your flow hood. All of this has to happen in front of the flow hood. And it all has
The
to happen.
sterilization happens in a pressure cooker. You know, you put it in and it gets it hot enough where it just destroys every bacteria and every mold spore in the whatever you're sterilizing, in the jars, in the petri dishes, in your bags of spawn, in your bags of grain. This is how we sterilize in mushroom growing. You know,
Can you do it in like an Instapot or something?
An Instapot is a pressure cooker.
Yeah.
They only go to like 10 pounds, I think is their maximum, so you have to kind of go at a higher pressure.
Okay.
I mean, at a longer time. Because sterilization happens with time and temperature and the Instapot, but I use them. You can use it. Yeah.
Right.
This takes
So-
a little longer.
Then we'll take them as
This
a
will go up
group.
to 15 pounds.
After they've been sterilized, inoculated, parafilmed, all in front of the flow hood, cleanest to dirtiest. You're gonna wrap it up. You don't go there?
No.
No? What do you do?
No. That's actually, you do that when you're sterilizing.
Oh, when you're sterilizing them. I'm so sorry.
We just haven't, but we haven't taught
I
them.
haven't taught this part.
So they'll get
In a long time. So,
this
how do
does
you
happen,
store 'em
and
so
there's
that they
a way.
stay
Like if you're
safe?
gonna. There you go.
how do you store them so that they stay safe? Like, where do you control
As soon as
the
you
temperature?
parafilm, they're fine. You control the temperature in your room.
In your
yeah,
room or in your
room.
vessel.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry guys.
But yeah, that so there you go. Like, but this aluminum foil is seriously important because you're going to put this in a super wet, humid environment. And what Patty's talking about here is you'll put these before they get sterilized.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's right. What do you mean? Sorry. You're doing great.
That in there. Okay.
Like
Yeah.
that, and so you come up, and then you actually want a cap. So like that gets you from any moisture going up, but then you
in.
need a cap on the top, so anything raining down is not going to get in. You do not want moisture in those dishes. You need them to be dry.
Right.
So like,
Thank
can you
you.
throw me one more piece of aluminum foil?
I couldn't find it. I
Okay,
don't know.
well, you're gonna have to pretend. Let's do an imagination game. Like I've done the little, I look at it like a boat because it's floating in the, there's possible water, steam coming up. But yeah, you
I knew
fold
we
it from the
missed
bottom
something.
first, and then a cap on top. Just imagine that I had some aluminum foil there.
Right.
There you go.
Yeah. Because you don't want them to get wet inside the pressure cooker. Because there's a
Yeah,
little
that-
bit of water inside your pressure cooker. Because you need steam in your pressure cooker because that's what's creating that pressure. You're boiling, you're bringing water to above boiling temperature. That's why it's pressurized. If you just boil water at 212 degrees, you're going to thermogenically hatch a bunch of stuff and it's not sterile. You're not killing everything. And you have to keep it under pressure for a certain amount of time in order to actually achieve that. So when you're sterilizing different substrate, this is a substrate, right? This
A
is
substrate is anything that the mushroom is growing on. Anything the mycelium is eating is
That's
a
a
substrate. That's what we
substrate.
call it. The mushroom growers have all this specialized terminology. They won't say the stuff that the mushroom is eating. That we'll say substrate.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep. And if you guys, when I give you my QR code, if you go in or if you find our email address, if you follow us on all of our stuff, I will send you all of this information, or at least a good portion of it, in a document that we've created that is basically like a lesson plan to get you back all the way through this. Okay? So that's all there. So you don't have to try to remember everything we're saying today. And again, come to the farm and learn. We're just down the road. Okay? So here's all this. I knew there was something important with the foil. There's water in
Foiled
here.
again.
Foiled again. There's water in here. You got to protect the interior of these before you pour your agar-agar. Okay, so that was.
It's not sitting in water. You only have a very small amount of water, and it sits on a rack outside of the water.
Okay, so it's,
Right?
Yeah.
you
So
got
there's
rack
a little.
right
But there is
there's a little
moisture
rack,
in there.
but the moisture is coming up from the bottom, and you're.
water bath.
Yeah, it's not a water
You're
bath.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
No.
because
Yeah. It's just it's creating steam. You got a tiny amount of water in the bottom.
right. But now,
The-
say for instance, just to bring this up, say for instance you're too poor, you can't get a all-American $120, $200, however much they are pressure cooker. You can't go to Walmart and buy a Smart Pot. You just don't have that kind of money laying around. I don't. I'm broke ass.
Although smart pots are like on, if you go on
You can
the
get 'em
used
used.
market, you get them for
You
$20.
get 'em
man.
used.
I mean, you know,
It's
they're-
true.
It's
This is true, but you might not even have $20. You can do a process of sterilization doing something called how do you say it?
Tendilization.
Tendilization.
Yeah.
Right? You're gonna cook it in a vessel. You're gonna cook it in there for about an hour and a half, 2 hours. You're gonna bring it back down to temperature. You're gonna let it sit there for 24 hours. Stuff's gonna hatch. Super happy. Thank you. You're gonna kill it again. Cook it.
Yeah, it's instead of high temperature, it's we've talked about
200.
like boiling it hatches those thermophilic. They call thermo lovely. You know, they like the heat and they hatch, but they don't like to stay in the heat. They hatch in the heat. It's kind of like with compost. It heats up, they hatch, and then the hatching process is usually associated with a cool down. You know, and so then they multiply. You kind of trick them with the multi-day cook. You know, they'll hatch, and then you hit them again in 24 hours, and they're all hatched and naked out of their
They're having a
heat
little party.
resistant
They're not expecting you
shell.
to heat it up
and then,
again.
Yeah, and then you smash them.
And you smash them.
And you do that 3 days in a row,
reproduced.
and you can get some
Yep.
sterilization
Yep.
in a
In
pot,
that-
just in a regular pot.
In that 24-hour period that you've let them be born, they've already reproduced. They've already laid their little eggs and done their little sporulation. That stuff's not alive yet. When you kill that stuff again, you're gonna birth the stuff that they laid. So you have to hit them one more time. So it's a 3-time process. So you can get around having, and this was, this was something that came about before there was the Smart Pot. The Smart Pot's like the best thing ever because it is an affordable option to do small,
20, 30 bucks on
20,
these
30
ones.
bucks, and you can do small scale home production of stuff like this, right?
And you
But-
really need very little spawn production to amplify in non-sterile methods. You know, non-sterile methods, like you can create more spawn with just cardboard, which is a very selective medium. Like bacteria doesn't really like it that much. Other spores don't germinate on it that easily. So we can take a small amount of spawn that we created under sterile conditions and move it onto something like cardboard.
You can do a book.
Yeah, we were gonna show. We're gonna
can
do this
soak a
again.
book.
We're gonna me and my, like
And you
so you
can
can soak a
inoculate
book
a
and then
book.
inoculate a book and have you
You can do rolls of
recycle
toilet
all of that
paper.
old literature. That,
Yeah. Yeah.
All
So
the paperback novels.
all the paperback novels that were, whatever. Yeah.
then it all.
Burn a book, but I'll
Have a
inoculate a
giant
book.
library.
Let's open it up to some questions here. Like so far, where are we at? We've gone through the
So we've
auger.
gone through the
We've talked
auger.
about spawn production. And then the only thing left we have to do is talk about the fruiting conditions and that kind of thing.
Right.
Does anybody have questions right now? Just like throw them at us.
So the jar of the mycelial is basically the same as this bag of this stuff.
That is
which-
correct. This
which
is
what-
homemade. That is store bought, like
and then-
from
So you could take that jar of stuff and mix it in with your bin.
and will like that is
Yeah.
that is
That's
probably
how
I'm
we
going to
do
take
it.
this home and
Yeah.
I'm probably going to be doing
Yeah.
that with
It's
this.
not often that
Or tomorrow
we will
we'll
invest
use it in
a
the
big
Hoogle
box of commercial grade spawn. It's very rare that we will invest in this. This cost us about $90 to have delivered to our home from this company.
Whereas this probably was $1. You know, like
Right.
Yeah, but this
Yeah.
is like how far. I mean, this
Right,
is like
but the
gonna go
process
really
and
far,
if
but
you're
yeah.
they're
Yeah.
doing the same thing on an industrial scale that we're doing at home,
Yeah.
and it's and we've been to their facility. It's pretty amazing. Their
It's
whole
pretty
their whole
amazing.
thing is
It's
pretty
pretty
amazing.
But
Yeah.
you did ask an important question. Speaking of like industrial facilities and commercial grows, so you said pushing your genetics, continuing. Say for instance, I got one precious auger plate, and I just continue to take this and move it plate to plate to plate, and then I only take a portion of them and expand them out, and I keep working from this plate.
Right.
It's like working with a mother in cannabis. Does that make any sense? At some point, the vigor is going to go.
So
And you're going to want to move away from that and capture spores again. And then the other thing that can happen that you really don't want to have happen, especially if you're trying to continue stuff on and do it for a long, long time, is you can have a virus like hop latent virus, but that's specific to your mushroom, and it can cause problems later on down in your production line that you're not really able to diagnose because it's a virus and you don't have the skill level. And maybe even if you had the skill level, you might still be stumped. And we've been to commercial farms where that kind of thing's been going on, and all the guys in the lab tech, all the people who are their breeders are like, what is going on? This is fruiting in this weird way, and we can't figure out why. We've tested all of our cultures. We've looked everywhere. We don't know where the contamination is coming from, but it's doing this weird thing, and it's ruining this genetic line for us, and we don't know what we're going to do.
And it's hard to clean up with mycelium because you can clean up a plant with a Clorox and a microculture, but you Clorox some mycelium, you're toast. So
Yeah.
the thing to do if you're going to get hung up, and I just think like, and this is where I'm willing to change. I'm willing to change. Like for me, it's just I just don't care, man. A multi-spore is fine with me. I don't need the best of the best of the best, and I'm not really hung up on
Just
showing off my skill at breeding yet. I'm open to do it.
Say
Now there's
louder for the people in
competitions.
the
I'm
back.
smelling like maybe I'll do that. But you cryopreserve. What you want to do is germinate your spore, get your line set up like, ooh, I like you, and then you put a ring on it by putting it in a cryogenic storage. Like mushrooms can go down into the negative 90s or whatever, and you can keep that thing for 50 years under those conditions and wake it back up.
Yep.
So if you lose it, you've done all the clones, and so there's a theory that it's genetic drift. Like people, it's a debate, like is it genetic drift? You keep cloning the clone, eventually it gets kind of not the same as what
Yeah.
and it develops problems. I just think it's the virus. Viruses and weird things get in there. I have done a lot of clones to clone. Like I've cloned through at least 2 seasons, and I've never seen it. I mean, I think it would be hard to explore and find that edge where you're starting to drift enough without a virus intervention. I don't think it's genetic drift. That it might be if you were really doing that a lot and you were in some kind of commercial
right. It
thing.
seems like it would be hard to distinguish between the one from the other two.
Right. Just like
At
it's
least
hard,
for me-
like it's
What
hard
is
to
genetic
distinguish.
drift? Is that maybe just
I think it's
That's happening.
viruses most of the time, but I mean, I just think it's hard to clone that many times where the genetic drift, but I'm sure that there are people doing commercial scale work where they're doing that, and maybe they've come near that border and that edge where
You're
they're
talking about
genetically
somebody
drifting.
who's doing scale work, right?
Yeah.
In other words, right? Like you're, as a home grower, you're probably
You're never
not
going to hit
pushing your
that. Like
genetics
you could probably
that
go
hard.
6 years is what I'm saying, and like
Right.
probably not.
Right.
And then a really cool thing with doing outdoor, especially with like agaricus and with the garden giant, with cubensis, even you can set up a bed right by your next bed.
Yeah.
Like so, and then you can clone by just instead of like scraping the stem butt and trying to get as much meat out of that particular mushroom as possible. So you got a bed. Imagine a bed that's 20 feet long right there, and then it's fruiting. And then when it starts to fruit, we put another bed right by it.
Yeah.
If you will pick your mushrooms and instead of cleaning the stem butt, cut it off and then plant it and like do every 4 inches.
Yep.
And if you get nice canopies of mushrooms, that's very easily doable. You're cloning that every single mushroom as you go over, and you don't need to respawn. You don't need to go back to this process.
Yeah,
You can use
and stem butts are actually
for a lot of
incredibly
types of
reproductive.
mushrooms. For a lot of types of
Incredibly
mushrooms, you can do this technique, and it's something that people don't talk about. Like these are not.
And you can do
Literally
that with
take
grocery
the
store
fruiting
mushrooms
body
too, especially
and then put
oysters.
it over.
Yeah.
You take the stem butt of the fruiting body. Now,
Let's
it's
talk
in-
about
it's-
what the stem butt is.
It's in the community of mushroom growers that people are taking stem butts and like transferring them to wood and doing more spawn. But
Gotcha.
you can
So
actually do
Here's a fruit cluster.
yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna pick this out. Do you see that white right there?
Here, give it to him to pass around.
Yeah, I will.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, it's really hard to
It's
tell
really
where
hard
the
to
stem
tell.
butt ends
Yeah.
on this
Yeah,
one.
this is so tiny and fragile. But right in here what we talked about earlier, where you have two threads, two myceliated threads that came together to form a hyphal knot. That's where you're getting that fruit from.
Nice.
Well, if you take that same tissue where that reproductive energy was at, and you take it and you throw it back out, you're putting out a really reproductive part of the mushroom.
Yeah, it's literally stem cells, right? You know,
You're
it's like stem cells, like
Right.
the most vigorous ones of all, and you're transferring them to
And
your
you're transferring
next
them out
medium.
into your next medium. So you
And then
can
you're really
continue
getting
to
away from
propagate
like,
that way too.
like don't do lab work if you don't have to, and that's one way that you can do it. And it really
Yeah.
works well for a lot of different types of mushrooms. Some that might be very exciting to you, you know.
So
like,
would that be like you're doing like a cloning sort of thing, or would
you're
that be
cloning when
You're
you do
cloning.
that.
spores
You're cloning in that
falling down
zone.
onto the
when you're
stem?
when you're working with spores, you're actually creating a new
DNA profile.
A new DNA
Yeah,
profile.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But when you're taking a stem bud, you're just copying that particular fruiting body.
Yep.
If your bed was full of a multispore inoculation, in other words, like if I made the spawn from multispore, if this came from multispore, it's not, this is a clone. If it came from multispore, you would have all kinds of genetic variants in this one jar. So I put it into my bed and all these mushrooms come up. Each one is potentially a different genetic profile, and probably is. you
And
know?
in the mushroom growing world, in the commercial mushroom growing world, one thing that's very important to take into consideration is if you go to the grocery store and you take some portobello and you decide, oh, I'm going to take this, I'm going to do a bunch of tissue culture. So basically,
And then I'm
you
gonna
just
sell
cloned.
it. Yeah.
You just cloned some commercial growers mushroom.
They'll come get you.
They can find, if you get big enough, they could look at you and say, hey, look, we did a DNA sequence on this, and this is identified as belonging to Paul Stammates. And now, any money you made from this, you owe him. And that could happen, you know? So do the spore if you're going to do something like that. Or better yet, go out, go hunt.
Yeah.
Find something totally new that's out there in nature that survived
Yeah.
and that reproduced on its own. You're
Yeah,
going
learn
to
how
have
to breed.
more genetic
There you go.
vigor there.
Yeah.
Then yeah,
I
that's
just
just
did that at my house. I read about how you can take oyster mushrooms that you find and put them in the wet cardboard.
oh, that's
Yeah.
exactly
And
what
roll
we're
it up.
talking about.
Yeah.
You're cloning when
exactly-
you do
I've
that.
got some
Yeah.
sitting on top of my fridge right now.
Yeah, you're cloning.
That
when
would be
you
a
do
clone
that.
of
would be
that
a clone.
particular one.
But
If you took
you're
the spore
creating
print-
yeah, but you're potentially creating a multi-spore project because there are spores,
spores
in
in there
those
too.
gills, right? And so when that comes together,
But you wouldn't
and
want to
fruits-
transfer the gill. The gills rot and contaminate more, so you just really want to use
You
the,
wanna use
the stem butt
the stem
material.
butt material.
Okay.
to do.
Good point.
Good to know.
So let's recap, because I think there might be one more speaker after us. I don't know what's happening tonight. I'm barely able to kind of hang on to my own thought thread.
We're gonna be doing dinner after this.
Dinner after this. Okay, so dinner.
We're getting close here. I don't know what our time
So we'll
is
just
like.
recap what we talked about.
Yeah,
so
we told you what we were gonna tell you,
full
and then we told you, and
Yeah.
now we're gonna tell you what we told you.
Right.
Right?
So, full cycle. We took bulk substrate. That's what we started with in the class, right? But in terms of moving through the journey of a spore, you're going to take your spore, you're going to take that, you're going to move it to agar, whether you do it in a jar, whether you do it on a plate. Doesn't matter. Either way, you've germinated your spores. You're going to take that material, you're going to take that and inoculate grain spawn.
One question.
Yeah.
How long does it take for it to inoculate in the agar before I can transfer it to the?
You'll go by how it looks. Like that's totally like
That's
it's,
dependent
for one,
on-
it's
Is
up
it
to
like
you.
an hour or is it like a month?
Oh, it's,
Oh,
like,
no,
it's
like-
a few weeks.
A few weeks. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe 10 days to a few weeks.
Okay.
Yeah, and it depends on the mushroom.
Yeah.
Some are fast
A lot
growing.
of mushrooms have different growth rates. The ones we use can be as quick as 5 days and as long as
Okay.
two weeks.
Yeah.
And depending on the temperature.
Okay.
When you hit its ideal temperature,
It's going to go faster.
it'll go
Yeah.
faster. If you're outside of its ideal temperature, it will typically go slower. If it's higher or lower, just they have a little narrow window where they'll just do a lot faster.
Moment of opportunity, is that what you called it?
Yeah.
Oh, I
Or like
Window.
window of opportunity.
window of
of opportunity.
Yeah, well, it's a
Right.
small window of its preference. But you'll transfer it out whenever you're ready.
Okay.
You want to do it so it has a you want to transfer it when it's at its most vigorous. If it hits the sides of the walls of any container,
And starts growing
It will-
up the sides.
it'll send a signal that will tell it, hey, we're out of food. It's
Yeah.
time to slow down and just digest what we've got. We've hit our border, and so it will not be as vigorous. You really want to get the mycelium out of there before it hits the edges of your dishes, you know, and just to maintain and that super speed of colonization.
That's kind of your best window of time. But you could, if you needed to, you could store them in the refrigerator.
Okay.
You want to protect them from fluctuations in temperature. That's something that, like I said, you see when you start to see failure in your petri dishes or in your agar dishes. The reason for that is typically fluctuations in temperature and introduction or the development of condensation on the inside of the plate. So you're gonna want to wrap that in some kind of insulated little thing and kind of maybe like a tiny cooler or something so that you can protect it from temperature fluctuations. Put it in the back of the refrigerator. Don't suffocate it. You're gonna slow it down quite a bit and reduce its oxygen needs, but don't suffocate it. Don't wrap it up in a bunch of like saran wrap or something like that, thinking like, oh, I'm going to really protect it. No, you're going to just suffocate it. So, you know, and then move it to the back of the, you know, somewhere where it's not going to freeze, but somewhere where when you open and close the door, it's not going to, or a dedicated refrigerator. Some people like to get like a little dedicated, you know, one of those garage, right, refrigerators or whatever. And that's where you store all your cultures, right? That's a good way to do it. So you're going to take that. Go ahead.
I just was gonna say same question, but about the grain stuff.
Yep, we can store that in the fridge too.
What's the lifespan on that in the fridge?
I don't like to store grain that's colonized for more than a month or two. Honestly, like, you know,
Again, it's gonna keep going. It's gonna lose its vigor.
Sure.
Yeah.
but I've had really successful results. You know, my own person. You know, people. Yeah. I don't know a lot of the. I don't know other people's results, but like a month to 2 months is kind of where I want to. You know, I'll throw it out after it's been there too long. You know.
Okay. Awesome.
Or compost it. We say throw out. We don't mean
Right.
like
Yeah, nothing's
no,
getting really
nothing's
thrown
getting
away
thrown
to the
away.
dump. or
It'll
whatever
just get
it does.
moved.
It
Well,
turns into soil without
Yeah.
giving
what
us the
most
mushrooms.
frequently
Yeah.
happens on our farm, and this is how we found out about these bags, is because we had a bunch of spawn that we were like, I'm not gonna put this on primo, really well treated substrate for the purposes of fruiting it for maximum yield. But we have all these wood chips because PG&E came and chipped some trees, or we chipped some trees. So we want to break that stuff down faster. We'll just take our inoculant that we would have liked to have had it survive or do well, or if it's contaminated, and we'll inoculate.
Yeah, just throw it into
a
piles
lesser-
of debris that you want
a
to
lesser
compost.
desirable.
And
So
it-
if I
and-
have a really old one of those in my fridge, it's worth throwing it into some
Absolutely.
wood
Into
chips?
some wood chips.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you might get a fruit.
Yeah.
Then you might get a new opportunity.
but
to
you'll
like
definitely
that
break
back.
down. You're going to cycle your whatever material you're using as your primary input, whether it's wood chip, straw,
Manure.
or
bug.
grass clippings or whatever. You're going to be able to cycle that into your plants a lot quicker. You know,
Right.
if it just sits there in compost, and you're also going to get the benefit. For me, it's the worm food. Like mushrooms are just the perfect thing to go into your worm beds.
Go ahead.
I just want to make sure we talk about the fruiting aspect. Like we kind of did the spawn, and then
let me
so the-
finish the recap and get back to bulk substrate, and then we'll talk about that
Okay,
real
we do-
quick because
okay.
they're serving dinner. And
I
let's
know.
Just,
I just
okay,
like
so
but we could do it in 4 minutes.
we can
5
do it in
minutes,
like
and then
we'll do it real quick. So now you've gone from your agar plates to your grain spawn. You've gone from your grain spawn to your bulk substrate, and some of you, more of you if you want, can take home a bagged kit, and then you're dealing with fruiting. Now, you're going to wait a little while. Again, it depends on your strain. It could be 7 to 10 days before you start seeing things really kind of running through. Could take up to 14 days for your mycelium to run through and fully colonize your substrate, your bulk substrate. When you see that happen, you have to initiate fruiting, and that is going to also be strain specific. For your oysters, temperature fluctuation dipping down is going to create the trigger in that organism to say, it's time for me to reproduce, right? For something like something that likes to grow on manure, you're going to case it. That's going to be a really important thing. You're going to case it with a moist layer. Ray, you want to talk about casing at all, or what do you want to?
Well, some things you case and some things you don't. Like if you're
Like oysters, you don't case.
Nah, you don't case those oysters. You don't do that at all. They don't need the casing. But if you were growing, say, if you were growing Psilocybe cubensis, or
Or if you're
an
growing
agaricus
portobellos.
mushroom, you would definitely want to do a casing layer. I like to use on outdoor beds just a straight vermiculite layer is kind of my just soak. Yeah.
Yeah, you want to hydrate.
I was
it.
drifting out there. I tuned out for a second. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I went away for a moment.
That's okay.
I was
Yeah.
gone.
We've
I don't
been
know
up
where I
here a
was. I
long
was
time
like,
and talked. So I've totally spaced out like a whole step. I was just like, skip that.
So
You know.
man, that's we're gonna get back in the group. The next time we're gonna do it.
We're
even
in the
like
group,
that.
baby.
We're gonna
Yes.
get it even
We're
better.
in the
You
group.
are in the group.
We're in
We're
the
gonna,
group. We're
we're
in
gonna
the
get
group.
it. What's the
So
next one?
now you've got your oysters. Some of you are taking these kits home. I've got a QR code on my phone. I'll be here again tomorrow. I'm not going to stay here for the night, so you guys won't be able to come and find me tonight. But I have a QR code for a document that's in the Noble Gardens Google Drive. That's a PDF that talks all about the fruiting process. And you'll learn a lot in that document, no matter what you're fruiting. Okay, oxygen exchange is incredibly important for the fruiting process. Did you see those little skinny, stringy, sad-looking oyster mushrooms? The reason they look so sad is because they're starving for oxygen and it's freezing cold simultaneously, right? So
They were starving for oxygen because I tied up the.
Yeah.
the
Oh, you
bag.
tied up the bag.
I
Yeah.
tied up the bag.
Tied up the bag to
It's
protect
also extremely
the
cold.
moisture.
It's out of its.
And it's cool.
I didn't expect it to fruit. I did expect it to run.
Yeah, but
But-
we fucked around and found out, and we got some fruit, so that was really cool. But
was
they
really
are
interesting.
what you refer to as leggy fruit. We got a bunch of leggy fruit. That's cool. Fry that up, whatever. Eat it.
Right.
It's good. It's still mushrooms, but they're not ideal. So oxygen exchange is incredibly important. You have a few enemies to your mushrooms: dehydration, heat, overwatering. Okay, and too cold. If it's too cold, you're gonna give a leg up to something else, usually molds. If it's too hot, you're gonna give a leg up to something else, usually bacteria. If you don't offer enough oxygen, you're probably not gonna see fruit. If you offer too much water, you might see some fruit, but you're gonna see bacteria coming in right behind it real quick. Okay, so it's a little balance. It's a little dance. If you smell your substrate, and it smells like sour apples, that's bacteria. You'll see mold. Don't open it. Put it back in the pressure cooker, kill it, then open it. Spores are spores are spores are spores. You breathe them in, you are a perfect breeding ground for spores. You're warm, you're wet, you're dark, and you have oxygen. You got everything they want inside those lungs. Don't fruit in your house if you can avoid it.
And if you do fruit in your house, you want to
Well then,
you want to suck the air out of your growing area out.
Outside.
Don't push the air deeper into your house. You know, you want to have an area that you're growing in with a constant negative pressure in that area, so it's sucking
so
everything
a window
out.
fan pulling
Yeah.
out.
If it's anywhere in your, you know, if
it's
you
anywhere in
have
your
a hobby grow in your house or whatever, you definitely should have it going negative pressure and going out to the outside.
Even if you're growing and fruiting in sealed tubs,
But
when you open those tubs, those spores are in there.
the main thing I really want to, because I know
Yeah,
we have
talk about
is,
it, talk about it.
well, it's just that our goal with creating spawn is to go into what we call the bulk substrate, which would be these wood chips, and we can pass this around. I don't know if everybody get a chance to look at this, so you can feel. And this is not sort of the ideal substrate. This was a definite experiment, and it worked. You know, we're using a lot of pine straw, which is not its preferred food, but you can feel if you pass it around that it is grown into a solid unit. You know,
Right, like this was all loose. It was like we basically collected what looks like off the ground in here, and we bagged it up.
Yeah, it's just wood chips from and not sterilized at all, just soaked in water. That was it.
Soaked in water. That wasn't
cold water,
pasteurized. That wasn't anything. We just soaked it in water in a tub for a day, and drained it, and inoculated it, and it knitted it together and started breaking it
The
down.
whole point of spawn is to get to these bulk substrates that will then produce mushrooms, and you can sort of see it there. That's the main thing. And so there's just a lot of ways to do that. We could do another 5 hours on that subject alone,
Right.
but it will go into and examples of bulk substrate will be straw, manure, wood chips, sawdust, banana leaves, lots of agricultural waste can be used. You just have to learn the mushroom that you want to grow and find the bulk substrate, and that's the point of producing the spawn, is to get into the bulk substrate. It's kind of the main thing. Any other questions on this whole thing? Because I think we're wrapping
I
up.
think that's it. I think that we've told you everything we can think of at the moment.
Well, I can think of more if you want.
Oh,
to
I
ask me
know.
that.
We could talk forever on it. It's like,
Any burning questions though? Otherwise, it's time to eat.
At what point do the mushrooms come?
That's it depends on the mushroom. It depends on how much you inoculated. It depends on your temperature. You're going to grow the mycelium out in what they call spawn run conditions, and it will run through your bulb. This is if you're indoors. Then you can control the conditions indoors to initiate fruiting. So you'll add fresh air, you'll add light. You'll get some mushrooms like a cold shock. Some mushrooms don't need a cold shock. There are things that you can do to initiate the fruiting indoors, but you will do that not so much based on time, but based on the amount of colonization that's happened in your bulk substrate, right? So when it's all white and contiguously grown through, you'll be like, okay, cool, we're ready, and then you're gonna fire off your initiation strategy and produce the mushrooms. But it's not time. It's
Right. No, I don't mean time. I meant like what point in the step. So like I have this bag of stuff,
so
and
it'll
then what?
Right.
Well,
so
it's going to grow. You put it in its preferred temperatures range, and with that, it's just like in your
68 to 75.
right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you're going to have to. One of the key things to initiate fruiting is a very high humidity. So there are a lot of ways. We make little tents
Humidity domes.
with bags with plastic. You can do a shade and misting. I
included a bunch of pictures in that document.
Awesome.
There are a lot of ways to get the humidity where you want, indoors and outdoors. I like to put those bags up in a bush underneath in the canopy of the bush, and then wet the whole bush.
Okay.
You know what I mean? And
Yep.
then inside of that, all of that vegetation, that's wet, it will make a nice humidity zone. There's a lot of different ways. If you're in the right environment, if you're in the humid part of the year, and you're in a shady part of the forest, and you put your kit in that situation, it'll just there you are. You're in
the
natural
whole bag?
conditions.
Yeah,
What's that?
yeah,
Like
you'll
the
just
whole
have the
bag?
whole
Yeah, the whole
bag,
bag.
and it'll fruit out of those little
It'll fruit
holes
out
that
of
we
the hole.
poke,
Okay.
Oh.
because it's going to seek the oxygen.
That was the part.
You'll actually want to open up, like when you get, because we didn't put very big holes. I only
they were
used my
small.
knee. So
Oh, okay.
you can add little slits once it all turns
Once it's white. Okay.
a bigger knife, or you can take a knife and do a little slit with it. Some people will slice a
Just
big
one slice right down the middle on one
Yeah,
side.
on one side, and it'll come out that way.
Awesome.
Paul Stamets in one of his old books had arrowheads that make a nice little flap, like it stays
Yeah.
closed. You poke the arrowhead in there, and it's basically closed except for the slits. But when the mushroom pins form behind that little flap, it can push that out. You know, that's a really good. You can also simulate that with a blade, a little razor blade, and make yourself a little flap like that. There's a lot of ways to do it.
You want to be careful with a kit that size, because you're
That's
going to
not
lose
a lot of momentum. You could dry it out really
you could
quick.
dry it out really quick. Yeah, you could dry it out really quick. So that's one of the reasons we like mound culture as well, because
Yeah.
you can always go ahead and top dress it with a little bit of wet or moist straw to kind of give it a little bit more if it starts to dry out. If it's really hot and you're experiencing a lot of evaporation, it'll continue to kind of eat through what you've added. So that's a good question. Yeah. And from start to finish, from the time you start with an agar dish that you've worked with from spores all the way until the time that you can fruit something and actually have something to eat, it might take 8 weeks. Unless you're working with something like shiitake, in which case you might be waiting 3 months. Right?
Awesome.
Yeah. So, thank you guys.
Thanks a lot.
You can, of course. If you guys want to follow us and get in touch with us, I put out a couple of QR codes on that table over there. You can just scan that with your phone. That'll link you directly to our Instagram. You can follow us there. You can message me there. I'm very responsive. Whenever you message there, you're always talking to me for the most part, because it's just they only let you log in on one phone. And then if you have questions for Ray, who's the real expert on the subject, I will link you with him through his email or give you his phone number, and he's, always wants to talk mushrooms. So thank you guys so
Thank you so much, Patty and Ray. Thank y'all. You can find them. Was it Noble
Thank
Gardens?
you.
What is it on Instagram?
Instagram, we're noblegardens.ca, and you'll know it's us if you see like a rainbow mandala sky logo. There's a couple of other noble people out there, including here. You've got
We have our
Noble.
Noble,
You've got
yeah.
Noble over here. So that's kind of it was a neat synchronicity.
Totally.
Oh my god.
All right, everyone, it's food. Go get some food if you haven't. And we're going to take just like a short break since a lot of us have already eaten. And